Lightning cuts through the sky, illuminating the streets flooded with rain, and through the noise of the storm, someone asked two questions about whether the video had been released yet and whether the Association of Supernatural Power had reacted to it in any way. And since the association did not react in any way, it means that they do not want to reveal the source of the supernatural power. As it turned out, these questions were asked by one of the criminals who attacked the students, holding them hostage. The children were in a panic, but they reassured themselves that the association should not be indifferent, so they had to be saved. They just had to wait a little. And then, one of the students decided to fight back against the criminals, to at least try to stop them. But just as the daredevil wanted to do something, Lin Luan stopped him with words that the teenager should not act like a hero and control himself, because he would not be able to do anything against the bandits alone. However, the guy was not alone, because the others were ready to help him, because everyone wanted to be saved, and there were only 4 criminals, so the students decided to join forces. But the bandits were not so simple, so they quickly noticed that something was being prepared against them, and ordered the teenagers to behave more calmly, and one of them had the power to increase in size, which looked very frightening. The teenagers did not expect such a turn of events, so suddenly all their confidence in victory evaporated in an instant. Even though the criminal's accomplices with the power of growth told him not to go too far with the children, he still hit one of the boys with all his cruelty. The blow was so strong that the unfortunate student's blood flew in all directions. This action scared all the students so much that they began to panic and run away in all directions without even thinking. Lin Luan then realized that this was the perfect moment to save himself, and shouted about it to the guy Ahao, whom he had stopped before. But the daredevil once again decided to act like a hero, thinking not about himself, but about others. After all, the student understood that not everyone would be able to escape from the giant, so he wanted to help as many people as possible. Then Luan remembered a situation from his childhood, when he and his friends, 5 of them, swam to the middle of the lake, and he returned alone, and then many scolded him for not helping the others. In the end, the rest of the children were saved by others, but many still blamed the boy for the fact that if his friends had died, their deaths would have been on his conscience. Lin himself did not understand what he was guilty of, because he could not have helped the others, but at least he could have saved himself. Therefore, using the same logic, Luan told Hao that they had to leave in order to save themselves first. The students realized that the safest course of action was to duck, walk where there was no light, and head for the door through which they could escape. But then the guys noticed a figure that was on the ladder, but it was not clear who exactly it was because of the darkness. The stranger concluded that the turmoil was the best time to act. After these words, the unknown person jumped out from cover and struck one of the criminals, doing everything so quickly that he did not even encounter resistance. As it turned out, the stranger's name was Ji Feng, and he was one of the most popular newly minted heroes with supernatural powers from the association. And if he was here, it meant that the others were saved. The man waited for the best moment, and as soon as it arrived, the hero took advantage of it and quickly dealt with the villains. But Feng only defeated 3 of the 4 criminals, because the last one hid in the crowd of fleeing students. But the hero himself did not know about it. Lin tried to shout to the man, but because of the hustle and bustle he couldn't be heard, so the guy couldn't warn the hero and decided to save himself, hoping that Feng would fix everything himself. The hero himself from the association had already reported by phone that he had dealt with everything, and almost all the students had already run out into the street, so he thought that everything was fine. But Feng relaxed too early, because while he was distracted, a 4th criminal attacked him from behind, the existence of which the hero did not even suspect, so he was not prepared for this attack. And then, unexpectedly, the man was saved by a boy who kept repeating to himself that he needed to save himself first, but ended up jumping under the villain's attack to save another person. Lin remembered that moment from his childhood again, because it was then that the boy wanted to become a hero, when he saved the other children thanks to the fact that he swam quickly and was able to loudly call for help. In this situation, the student really acted like a real hero, because by sacrificing himself, he saved the man. In the criminal's opinion, Ji Feng was a vile person because he hid in the crowd in order to attack later, and the villain was glad that he was able to escape in time. Then the villain began to reason how he could punish the boy for preventing the killing of a popular hero who would no longer be alive if not for Luan's actions. Then Ji Feng ordered the criminal to release the student, but he would agree to this only if the hero threw away his sword so that everything would be fair. The villain ridiculed the man who is the hero of the association, but at the same time it is he who is saved, and not the other way around. In the end, the hero had to make this deal so that the criminal would stop torturing the teenager, so he had to throw away his sword. In the criminal's opinion, Feng was no match for him without a sword, so he began to rejoice, thinking that he could now win this battle. However, while the villain was rejoicing over his yet-to-be-achieved victory, the hero was able to grab the sword again and deal the enemy a blow that he did not expect. So Feng managed to cut off the criminal's hand, which was holding the guy, who simply fell to the ground, hitting himself hard. The hero, in turn, simply apologized to the student, explaining to him that the situation was simply critical, so he had to act quickly, otherwise someone else could get hurt. Luan became a hero who saved everyone, but unfortunately, no one could save the teenager himself, who simply remained lying on the ground. In the end, Feng only told the boy that the blow was fast, so Lin should not have felt anything, so he would die without pain. Feng's savior did not understand how the hero could kill him without hesitation, because the man could have come up with something to save the teenager, but Ji simply did not want to come to the rescue. And then Lin saw a sign, like in a game, which said that the guy had received a chance to be resurrected, and then a question about whether he wanted to take advantage of this chance. While saving the hero, Luan himself died, and now his funeral was taking place, which took place on a cloudy, rainy day. Meanwhile, Feng was receiving thanks for his heroic rescue of more than 200 people yesterday at 8 o'clock in the evening at Wencheng Middle School, where the attackers had taken all of its students hostage. The news said that Ji Feng had once again proven that their city's security could be relied upon. And while Feng listened to the enthusiastic cries in his direction, and Lin Luan's mother cried at his funeral, he himself chose resurrection in this mysterious tablet. The sign showed that the regeneration was complete, and then the question popped up about whether to accept the reward, which was the use of an ability called Capture. Lin decided that this ability wouldn't make things any worse for him, and continued to regenerate, thinking that he had to teach Ji Feng a lesson. That's why Luan decided to accept this ability, wanting to take revenge on the hero for leaving the guy to die without even trying to save him. It turned out that as soon as he agreed to a second attempt at life, he was returned to the moment he died, so he immediately found the hero and attacked him from behind. Feng was talking on the phone at the time, reporting the situation, so he didn't expect that anyone would attack him. So the man was unable to react when Luan bit him on the shoulder so hard that blood gushed out. With the help of the blood that was spilled because of Lin Luan, the boy was able to analyze the hero's abilities, learning that they included Shadow Step, Snake Execution, Crow Tenacity, and Breathing Method. And this analysis was not done without reason, because the surviving student can absorb one of the provided abilities. When the hero saw that the student was still alive, Feng began to strike the boy, asking why he had not died yet. Meanwhile, Luan was thinking about which ability he should choose from the available ones, and eventually settled on the shadow approach. Thanks to this power, the teenager was able to dodge the blow that the hero wanted to inflict on him. But the problem was that Lin had no idea how to use and control this ability. Feng noticed what kind of power the boy was using, and then told him that it was quite ordinary, so the hero would not be surprised by this, because he did not know that this ability was stolen from him. In the end, both young people took advantage of this ability, but only one of them knew how to use it. Of course, the man's advantage was obvious, so he was already ready to deal a fatal blow to the student whom he was supposed to save. But this was not destined to happen, because after the bite, the hero's DNA began to change, so that suddenly he simply froze in place. And then Feng simply laid down his sword, without making the blow with which he so wanted to take the life of the one who saved him. The guy himself did not understand what had just happened, because he was already sure that he would soon die again. Here, before Luan's eyes, it appeared that the subordination was complete, and he received a new slave, and after that, the hero called him master. The guy learned that his abilities include the fact that after analyzing the enemy's abilities, he can bite him and absorb one of them. And the student also introduces a systemic factor into the enemy's body, thereby rewriting his genetic code, forcing him to obey. Luan was surprised that the hero had just wanted to kill him, and now he was obeying. And after that, Feng apologized to the guy, calling him master, and Lin in turn asked him not to call him that. After this, the guy began to scold the man for attacking so recklessly, and because of this, casualties could not be avoided, to which the hero replied that sacrificing several civilians to stop the villains is a normal practice. Then the student began to become disillusioned with the association, because one of the most popular characters was telling him things that didn't seem right, which meant that the others were probably the same. Lin Luan was so surprised by this whole situation that he still didn't believe that Feng was under his control. So he decided to test it by ordering the man to kill himself. The hero answered without hesitation that he was obeying, ready to do whatever the student ordered him to do. And Feng was really ready to do this, because he even took out his sword for this, then brought it to his neck. But at the last moment, when the hero was already on the verge of death, Lin ordered him to stop, because he initially did not expect that his words would be listened to. Luan decided that he would let the man live for now, but he still decided to make fun of him by ordering the hero to take off his pants, while the teenager himself recorded it on his phone camera. Feng followed all the student's orders, and the student, in turn, decided to disgrace the man by forcing him to take funny photos. The student found it very funny, and he even imagined how he would show this to the girls he knew, because they would go crazy over it. But then Luan's fun was interrupted by a girl who quietly approached the teenager who was making fun of the hero. And it so happened that this heroine came in at the wrong time because she saw something that would be very difficult to explain. Lin then ordered the man to get dressed quickly, while he looked at the girl who was unfamiliar to him, so he began to guess that she was also someone from the association. The heroine came for the hero, but told the boy that it was time for him to leave too, because his parents were probably already terribly worried. Finally, Luan gave his slave the order that the man should tell about everything that happened today at a press conference tomorrow. Feng replied that he was listening, and this short dialogue attracted the attention of the woman, who was surprised by what she had just heard. After this, the teenager ran to his mother and friend, who were very worried about the suddenly missing boy. Everyone immediately began to worry about the student's condition, but he began to calm them down by saying that the boy was feeling great. The building of the Association of Supernatural Power was simply colossal in size, cutting through the sky. It was to this building that Ji Feng and the stranger who had come to pick him up went. The girl stopped the hero, who was about to leave, and then asked if he had a minute. As it turned out, it was 10 minutes before the press conference, so the stranger didn't have much time to talk to the man. The question that the heroine wanted to ask was whether the boy with whom the man was caught was his fan, because the stranger was very curious about this. And then the girl asked if Feng had written down the tags he was going to highlight, asking him to look at them in the end. Luan, meanwhile, realized that he could only activate the ability for points, of which he had 50 when he was revived, but currently had 0, and he had no idea what to do to get them. But in the end, the guy decided that now was not the best time for him to think about it, because he was very tired, and he only wanted the lessons to end as quickly as possible. Due to the loss of strength after the events that had happened, Lin did not listen to the teacher at all, but simply practically slept during the lesson. And as expected, this was noticed by the teacher, who did not like at all what Luan was doing in class instead of learning the material. Teacher Ju made the boy stand up and repeat to the class what Newton had said, and the student in turn explained that he still couldn't recover from yesterday, and that was why he was so absent-minded. But they didn't even want to listen to the student, telling him to come back down to earth because it was just an accident. So he should think not about what happened, but about the fact that there were only 2 months left until the state exam. However, Lin was not so sure that the attack was just an accident, because the school is always under guard. But yesterday, when the guards were changing, the attackers were able to easily enter the institution in 20 minutes. But it remained a mystery how they did it, because the time for changing the guard is determined a day in advance. And the guard change schedule is only in the training unit, so it was unclear how this information reached the criminals. Then one of the students asked if Luan really meant to say that the academic department had colluded with the attackers so that they could take over the school. Lin explained to the student, whose name was Wang Tianhao, that this was not what he meant at all, but Wang continued to argue with him, proving that there could be no other meaning in the boy's words. Eventually, the teacher ended the argument by ordering Lin Luan to spend the rest of the lesson standing, punishing him for his behavior. And then Luan saw that he had been awarded 1 point for causing hostility on the part of Zhu Daiyong, who was a teacher, and this really shocked the boy, because it turned out that you can earn points by arguing with a teacher. During recess, the teenager's friend asked him how he was feeling, to which the boy replied that he was very hungry, so he needed to fix that. There was already talk in the class about who would take which exams, and everyone assumed that Wang Tianhao would take the exam in the supernatural power specialty because the guy was the strongest in the school. Then the student told the others not to worry, because he already had enough strength to protect them all. And then Van again focused his attention on Luan, telling him that the guy was a selfish person who only thought about how to escape. After these words, rumors began to circulate around the class that Lin Luan had fled during the attack on the school. But he was not at all concerned about the lives of his comrades. But the teenager was not upset by this at all, because before his eyes he saw that he had been given another 10 points because he had caused hostility on the part of his classmates due to his selfishness. Then Luan's friend stood up for him, telling Wang Tianhao to shut his mouth and not say anything he didn't know. The green-haired guy responded by saying that Lu Jiahao was probably the same as his friend Lin, because you become like the people you hang out with. And then Wang emphasized that Lu was talented enough that there was a chance that after passing the psionic exam, the guy would stop hanging out with such a worthless person as Luan. But these words only made the protagonist's friend even more angry. But Tianhao was not afraid of threats because he was the strongest, so the students could not do anything to him. Confident that no one would touch him, Wang was unable to block the slap that suddenly flew at him. And then Luan, who had hit the guy with green hair, was given another 5 points for starting a fight with his classmate and causing hostility on the part of Wang Tianhao. And then the main character realized the principle by which he was awarded points. It turns out that Lin Luan becomes stronger through bad deeds, which seemed like a rather strange system to the guy. Then the student decided that it was time for him to become bad, because if others could be cheeky and pretend to be strong, then why couldn't he do the same? But all the hero's zeal evaporated the moment the insulted van began to advance on the guy, clearly not with friendly intentions. The offended student even decided to use magic to take revenge for the blow that his classmate dealt him. The guy had almost struck, but the main character managed to escape, avoiding his terrible fate. However, the student with hurt feelings did not want to give up so easily, so he decided to deliver another strike called Thunder Palm, which was the technique of the boy's family. But here too, Luan was lucky, because he managed to escape without receiving a single blow. And while Wang Tianhao was scouring everywhere to finish off his brave classmate, he himself decided to have dinner, because he was very hungry. The main character has already managed to eat 4 pizzas, 2 baked chickens, and 5 steaks, for which he received another point due to gluttony and hostility from the cafe owner. Lu meanwhile asked his friend what he was going to do next, because the situation was quite dangerous. But Lin simply decided that he would hide, and that was it, and would do nothing else because, fortunately for him, the next day would be a day off. But the main character's friend started talking about the existence of a reagent that can turn anyone into a psionic, and then asked Luan if he wanted to try to become one. Lu noted that his friend was strong enough that even he sometimes had trouble defeating the guy, and if it was all because of the reagent, then the Jiahao family was ready to help Luan with money. But the hero noted that since they were friends, talking about money was inappropriate. And besides, the reagents will cost several tens of thousands. Luan can't sit on the neck of his friend's father. And then the guy remembered that a press conference was supposed to be broadcast at that moment, so he asked the waiter to turn on the TV. At a press conference of the Association of Supernatural Powers, it was said how the hero defeated 4 criminals. And at the moment when the talented psionicist Ji-Fen was called onto the stage, a stranger who had previously wanted to talk to him appeared in his place. The girl announced that Feng would not be able to attend the conference, as he had been urgently hospitalized due to the multiple injuries he had received the previous day. This shocked everyone, because just yesterday everything was fine with the man, and no one expected that something like this could happen. Luan didn't understand at what point the hero managed to get injured, because at most he could have just gotten scratched. And then he received a message that his subordinate was dead, on the very screen that the guy began to see after rebirth. The girl on TV was saying that the hero would not be able to perform in the near future, and then she suggested praying for the psionic's recovery, while the student did not understand why this stranger was lying. In the end, Lin figured out that the whole thing was because the hero had been ordered to tell the truth about his actions yesterday. So he was removed so that he could not tarnish the association. After this, the teenager began to worry that he, too, might be wanted because of yesterday's incident. Because if the association found out about him, the same fate as Fen awaited the boy. So Luan decided that he needed to be careful with how he used his abilities so that no one would know about them. The hero was also under pressure from the fact that on Monday, he had to meet with a classmate whom he had recently hit. But for now, he decided not to think about all this. So he went to his mother and asked if there was anything to eat. And then the teenager noticed that his mother was behaving strangely, as if she was hiding something important from him. Suddenly, someone started knocking hard on the door, shouting that it should be opened as soon as possible. It was an aunt who came running to ask how much money the boy's mother had transferred to the fund. It turned out that the grandson of the director of a pharmaceutical factory had gone on the run, taking with him the money collected by the foundation in the amount of 10 million, and the product turned out to be a fake, having no effect. And Luan's mother transferred 100,000 to these scammers, which was the woman's father's allowance, which is paid once to the family of the deceased. This is how the hero learned that his mother had purchased a reagent for a lot of money to strengthen her son's health. And she did this because of the day when Lin had not left school for a long time, and the woman's plans were simply to help her son become stronger. People who also fell for the scammer's promises started to go on strike to get all their money back. So there was a chance that they would achieve something. The teenager then said that he wanted to go for a walk, and then added that there was no need to worry about him, since he was just kicking a ball around with Hao. But Luan didn't go to play ball at all, but in fact he went to the place where the strike was taking place. And while the strikers were discussing what they would do next, Lin calmly jumped over the fence protecting the factory. The teenager found the CEO's office and then decided that he needed to find clues, such as the address where he or his accomplices lived, and then the student could easily sort everything out. And then, an unknown man came into this office and asked the hero why he came to this place. Luan recognized the young man as the leader of the protesters, and then explained to the man that the back door was open, so he slipped through. Then the protester said that he understood everything, and then smiled, and this smile did not at all match the fact that the sign showed a message about +1 point for hostility on the part of Lubin. It turned out that Lubin was the main one among the protesters, and the teenager did not understand where the hostility came from if the student wanted to expose the fraudster. Suspecting something, Luan asked the man how he got into this office, and he said that he also went through the back door to look for clues. Then the boy began to talk about how the thieves would definitely get what they deserved, because everything would come back to them like a boomerang. The young man somehow hesitantly agreed with the guy's words, and he, in turn, saw that he had gained even more points for hostility on the part of Lubin. Lin then realized that the man was Sun Chagun's accomplice, and was only pretending to be the victim to divert suspicion from himself. The teenager decided to use his capture ability, which cost him 50 points, which he had previously accumulated thanks to the hatred of his classmates. By using his power, the boy learned that the con man's abilities included performance, bragging, legal knowledge, and culinary skills. With the help of a high level of performance, one could act in a movie or become a swindler, so the student decided to take this skill. And while Lubin was threatening Luan, he in turn was just waiting for his ability to finally take effect. Finally, when the power began to take effect, the man fell silent and then simply called the student master, waiting for orders. The teenager then ordered the con man to explain why he was pretending to be a victim, and he began to explain that there were 3 reasons for this, including the desire to find out how the protesters were feeling, to become their leader, and to gain their trust in order to deceive them again. After hearing his subordinate's plans, Luan ordered him to be taken to Sun Chunggong. Meanwhile, at the Jade Pond Hotel, a girl was admiring a precious stone called azure mica, which had a very high market value. And the owner of this jewel was the same swindler who boasted to the girl that, with the help of this stone, he would increase the family fortune. Then the stranger asked Chengong if he planned to hide for the rest of his life, since everyone was looking for him, and he must be afraid that he might be discovered. To which the man replied that people are like fish. They remember for half a month, and then forget, and then it will be possible to return. Also, the swindler had 6 bodyguards, so people did not scare him at all. The main character, brought by Lubin, who was carrying out the orders of his master, also ended up in this hotel. Thanks to his subordinate, the guy was able to get past the security without any problems, because the man said that he was one of them. So the student and his virtual slave reached the main swindler, who immediately asked his accomplice if he had been able to calm the rioters. Driven by anger, Lin went to the one who had cheated his mother out of a lot of money. And while the swindler was not expecting it, the teenager hit him, putting all his hatred into this blow. The blow was so strong that Chunggong started bleeding, and the hero called him a worthless pig. The student pushed the man to the floor, and the girl was very scared by this, and so she started screaming. But Luan's subordinate quickly reacted to this, telling the guards not to pay attention, as everything was fine. And while the guards thought that their owner was just having fun, the student was able to beat him up to his heart's content, as punishment for the deception. When the swindler was asked where all the stolen money was, he replied that he didn't have any, because he had invested it all in new spar. In the man's opinion, it was not just a stone, but a mountain mineral that he bought from the Wang family's pharmaceutical company, so there was a high probability that it was not a fake. And the criminal sold ordinary stones to people because he took all the feldspars for himself, since he is a gemologist and understands stones. Then the main character thought that the skill of knowing stones would be useful to him in order to find feldspars. Luan decided it was time to bite Chengong to gain his knowledge of gemology. But the guy couldn't activate his ability because he didn't have enough points to do so. However, the student did not want to back down, so he began to think about who he could earn points from. He eventually decided to go with guards who were normal humans, not psionics, but they still cost a lot. The boy ordered his subordinate to go out to the guards and say that they were all fired, and that he, an ordinary student, would take their place. The man obeyed his master's order and did everything as he was told, and then added that the guard's place was in the garbage dump, not here. Meanwhile, Luan noticed the spar and then decided that it was in it that the thief had invested his entire fortune. When the guy looked at this spar, for some unknown reason his appetite increased, as if he hadn't eaten for a whole week. Therefore, the teenager could not resist and, without thinking twice, ate this precious stone. After this, the hero felt how strength overwhelmed him, and then he understood how exactly the spar should work. And while the guy was enjoying the feeling of power, the guards decided to interrupt him to figure out who they wanted to fire them for. It turned out that these guards were from the most famous company providing personal security services called Gepard. And since this company had professionally trained people, the money paid for them was not small. But even these mercenaries who possess extraordinary skill could not defeat the boy who ate the spar. The student had so much strength that even he himself was surprised at how much his abilities had improved. Looking at the sign, the main character realized that he now had enough points to use his power. The man did not understand what the boy who burst into his room was planning, but even without knowing what would happen next, he was still very scared. The first thing Luan ordered his new subordinate was to stop crying, because the man still couldn't calm down after the bite. It became clear that after subjugation, the characters of the bitten ones remained the same, which was only to the student's advantage because he did not want them to become soulless puppets. But the most important thing that Lin realized was that by hating his subordinates, he also gained points. And since everyone hated Changong, he would gain a lot of points from this. Luan first thanked the swindler for bringing his master so many points. And then the hero could not restrain himself and hit the thief again, because such a large amount of hatred shows that he deceived a large number of people. Remembering the people, Lin ordered his subordinates to compensate those who had been deceived within 3 months, and then added that this could be done either with money or with real spatulas. Later, the teenager asked Changong if the Wang family knew about the man's machinations, since they were his classmates' family, to which the man replied that these people really knew about everything. The hero also gave an order that once his puppets completed the task, they would still have to cooperate with the Wang family, deceiving only them, but not other people. The subordinates will have to find out more about this family, find out what else illegal they are doing, collect all the evidence, and report to their boss. The boy left his number with the men so that they would always be under his supervision, and then asked where else he could buy spar cheaply. Then Luan was advised to go to the Shumen market, where many people sell spar, and although you can find real ones, there are also plenty of suspicious people, so you need to be careful. And while Lin was calmly walking around the market, looking at the goods, some man ran into him and practically knocked the teenager off his feet. On the phone, the man spoke about getting rid of the goods as quickly as possible, and just as the hero recovered from the blow, someone crashed into him again. But this time, it was the girl who had previously been talking on the phone about the suspect heading towards Liulu Alley. The teenager asked the stranger if they had all conspired, and she in turn apologized and hurried forward. It seemed that the stranger was running after the very man who had collided with Luan before, but then everyone saw that this was not just a man running past, but a man with real strength. The stranger swung at the girl who was chasing him, in order to at least try to stop her, but with this blow the man also hit ordinary passers-by. Then Lin noticed that this stranger had the ability of gigantism, just like the villains from the school, so most likely this man was their accomplice. Then another man appeared and began to command the others to cordon off all the passages and drive the criminal to the old alley, because there were no people there. It turned out that it was Thunder Tiger Wang Man, Wang Tianhao's uncle, who always bragged about him in class. The classmate was always bragging about his uncle who was a 5-star psionic, so Luan immediately recognized the man. Upon seeing the criminal, the hero immediately attacked him, activating his abilities to attack. The villain tried to escape, but he failed because the psionic was much faster, so he quickly found himself next to the criminal. And while the fugitive did not understand what was happening and was simply looking at the man, he used his strength to strike. The attack was so strong that the criminal was thrown back several meters. The man began to beg the tiger not to kill him, and then promised that he would not tell anything, and could even swear to it. And then the psionic replied that he believed the man's words, because the dead can be trusted. The tiger began to ask the criminal where the goods were, and if he answered, they would even be able to identify his body. And then the fugitive began to say that he would tell everything if he was released. Wang Man then added that if the man didn't tell him, the psionic could easily find another approach to get the information. The criminal then decided to fight for his life, but the tiger only ridiculed him, calling this attempt childish fun. The 5-star hero was able to tear the enemy apart with one blow, without even putting in much effort. And Lin saw everything that was happening, because he followed his classmate's uncle to see where he was going. Because the boy came out of his hiding place, because he was too shocked by what was happening, it seemed that the tiger noticed him. Even though the teenager managed to hide, The psionic still heard some noise and asked who exactly was hiding like that, when the guy himself already understood that he was finished. The main character understood that since he heard this conversation, he would definitely not be left alive, so he needed to come up with something quickly. Then the guy decided to bite the man, but it turned out that he didn't have enough points for this, because the enemy's life force exceeded his own. Meanwhile, the tiger was getting closer and closer to the boy, who didn't know what to do now. And then there was some noise nearby. The psionic was distracted by it, so this was a chance to escape, which the teenager immediately took advantage of. However, the man still managed to see the person running away, but could not make out who exactly it was. But Wang Man was not going to let go of the one who overheard such an important conversation so easily, shouting that the guy should not even think about escaping from the man. The psionic ordered the others to grab the teenager, thinking that he was an accomplice of the defeated criminal, so everyone rushed to search. Lin kept running, hiding behind different buildings, and then he realized that he had reached a dead end and could no longer escape from those who were looking for him. The teenager had already decided that this was definitely the end for him, since there was nowhere to run and the enemies were already approaching. But then hands appeared from the wall. These hands grabbed the guy, clamping his mouth shut so that he wouldn't make any unnecessary sounds that could give him away. As a result, the tiger and his team did not see anyone behind this wall, and Luan did not understand how this happened. And while the boy was one step away from his opponents, they decided that he had managed to escape. Then the boy realized that he was saved by a girl named Shi Lily, who was an inspector, because that was written on her badge. And then, suddenly the tiger, in anger, hit the wall where the boys were hiding. But fortunately, the blow didn't hit the people, but it was very close to them, so they were very lucky that they weren't hit. And then, the 5-star psionics people informed him that the goods had been found, thereby distracting his attention, which had previously been focused on finding the guy. Then the tiger ordered everyone to leave, leaving the one who had been eavesdropping on his conversation, because he had other things to do than play tag with the unknown boy. As soon as the man left, Luan began asking Lily a lot of questions, but the girl did not answer any of them, ordering the guy to leave quickly. Lin was surprised at how indifferent the girl who saved his life turned out to be. At the place where the goods were hidden, the tiger began to interrogate the person working there, asking him if the man he had recently killed had any more accomplices, to which he received the answer that the one killed was the last one. These criminals worked together with Chunggong, carried out robberies, and then hid the spar among the building stones to divert suspicion. And then the girl who saved the guy turned to the tiger, calling the man a commander, and he then asked if it was her doing that someone managed to hide from him. After that, Wang Man asked Lily if they had sent appraisers along with her, since they needed to be sent to this place as soon as possible. Then the student decided that the girl and the Thunder Tiger were from different squads, and the man wanted to remove Lily in order to take sole possession of the spars. Meanwhile, Tiger told the girl that her inspection department could only inform and interfere with others, and then ordered her to get out. And since Lily needed someone who knew about stones, the guy decided to pretend that he was from the civil service, because he had talents for performing and gemology, so he could handle it. Then the boy asked if he would need to find the spar here, and then said that it was nearby, so he came quickly. And then the guy pretended to be a big fan of the tiger, and then introduced himself to him as Lily's friend and a gemologist. After the teenager finished admiring the man, he said that it was time to get to work. Wang Man asked the girl if it was really her friend from the inspection department, to which she responded positively. Although the guy knows that feldspar is a crystal formed through diopsidization and under the influence of supernatural power, it can also be found in vegetation, animals, but most often in minerals. The teenager introduced himself as a gemologist, a specialist who certifies stones based on their texture, color, and subtle vibrations of supernatural power. But the problem was that he knew nothing about it. And then, the guy saw on the table that he could use glasses to increase the level of abilities he had. While the student was sorting out his powers, people around him began to doubt that he would be able to find anything. Meanwhile, the tiger was thinking that the boy's back looked like the one who had managed to hide from him. Suddenly, the guy asked everyone to be quiet, because they were interfering with his search. But people continued to say that Lin was just fooling them, because such a young specialist would not be able to cope with such a difficult task. Meanwhile, Luan had raised his gemology level to master, so now he began to feel the fluctuations of supernatural power. Then the guy turned to those whose strength is very great, because such people interfere with his work, and he told them not to breathe, because it knocks him down. After that, the newly minted gemologist immediately found a level A spar because he felt the power that comes from such stones. As a result, out of 32 boxes, 12 contained level C spars and 2 contained level A spars. The boy labeled everything and told the others to handle the loading, since he himself was not a psionic, so physical labor was not for him. After that, Lin walked along with Lily, telling her his thoughts that the tiger most likely wanted to push the girl away in order to take everything for himself. And besides, the man was familiar with those villains, so they were probably in cahoots. And when Lily asked about evidence, the student told her that she was an inspector from the association, so she could investigate the case herself and find evidence. The girl then explained that Wang Man was the commander of the 9th Squad of the reconnaissance team, so she could not file a case against him based only on the student's words. Lily explained that there was no way to get under the tiger's skin, and then asked the guy for his number and address. Luan decided that he was able to interest the girl, and she asks for his information so that she can later ask him out on a date, which the guy was very happy about, although he gave his school address instead of his own so that his mother would not have questions, and then added that he was in his last year of school. However, Lily asked for this data not for herself, but for the association, which could reward the student for helping them in the investigation. And then the guy added that he didn't need a reward, and it would be better if the girl just let herself be bitten, after which he received a point for hostility from Lily. After this, the girl reported to her boss that the spar was found thanks to a high school student who had an amazing ability for gemology. The teenager's thoughts were occupied with the fact that he needed to find evidence that would prove the tiger's guilt, because Lily said that without evidence she could not do anything. The goal of the scammers was to profit at the expense of gullible people, and if the scammers were in cahoots with the Thunder Tiger, then that meant they were in cahoots with the entire Wang family. The guy was worried that no one had come to class yet, although many usually come early, but for some reason, everyone decided to be late. Then two of Luanya's classmates started discussing that no one came to class because Wang Tianhao and Lu Jiahao had made a date, so they ran to see her. A crowd of students gathered on the sports ground to watch two classmates fight, and then Li managed to hit his opponent so hard that he fell to the ground. Then Jiahao said that he had won, because they had agreed that whoever fell first would lose, which meant that Wang must now keep his promise and not bother Lin Luan anymore. However, Tianhao didn't want to accept that he had lost, so he said that he didn't care about words and continued to fight. And then someone from the crowd pushed Li, causing the guy to lose his balance and become distracted from his opponent. Wang took advantage of his classmates' confusion and hit him hard, saying that he was the strongest in this school so he couldn't be defeated. Tianhao summoned his ability to hit his opponent so hard that his bones would break, so he could end up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Wang had already swung, but he was unable to hit, because he was stopped by Lin, who arrived in time to save his friend. No one knew that Luan had such strength, so everyone present was surprised by the guy's appearance. After this, the hero asked his friend why he started fighting with his classmate, since this was not a solution to the problem. And then Lu explained that he was just tired of seeing his friend hiding after school every day, so he decided to settle the matter. Meanwhile, Van was so angry about what happened that he even blushed from the feelings that overwhelmed him. There were many voices buzzing among the crowd of those who had witnessed everything, some saying that Wang was no longer the strongest in the school, while others believed that the boy had simply been attacked unexpectedly, and that was why he had been unable to dodge. Tianhao didn't like being humiliated like that, so he was ready to fight further to defend his honor. The friend's enemy was furious, so they were already starting to think about what to do now, since running away was probably not an option at all. Lu asked his friend to teach him the punch that was used on their opponent as soon as possible. Then the teenager began to teach that one must concentrate, then concentrate all one's strength, fueled by anger, in one's legs and run. While running away, Lin also managed to ridicule his opponent so that they ran after him. Luan was able to run far enough for him and his classmate to be alone, and then confessed that he thought it was Wang who stole the shift change schedule for the villains, since the Wang family is in cahoots with the criminals. The main character said that he knows everything, and he even knows that his opponent's uncle killed the witness, and then added that he is giving his classmate a chance to turn himself in. Otherwise, he will report everything to the association's inspection department himself. Wang, in turn, did not even deny the teenager's accusations, and even praised Luan for being smart enough. Later, Tianhao even admitted that it was indeed he who suggested the idea of stealing the schedule to his father. It turned out that last year, Wang found the key to the study area and kept it for himself, initially not even thinking that it would be useful. It turns out that for the sake of the spar, Tianhao put his own classmates at risk, and he wasn't even ashamed of it, because he considered everyone to be just a bunch of trash. Van also thought that it was justified, since he would become a psionic in the future, so thanks to him, the lives of others would become better. and Luan's classmate tells everything so boldly only because he plans to beat him up so badly that the teenager will remain disabled for the rest of his days. And then, he will put a key in the boy's pocket to make him the villain. Lin responded to this by saying that his opponent was such a nasty guy that he didn't even want to bite him. So instead of biting, he called upon his strongest ability. So the classmates faced off in a very dangerous fight, deciding to use all their abilities to the maximum. Luan was so fast that Wang couldn't keep up with his speed, wondering how his opponent could do it. And while Lin was talking about how the association was rotten because of people like his classmate, Tianhao himself didn't understand where someone like Lin got such speed from. Finally, while Wang was at a loss, his classmate managed to hit him, saying that this was for all his actions. Although the main character was able to deal many blows to his opponent, and the latter in turn never responded to them, Van still considered himself the strongest. Luan, meanwhile, struck again, shouting that this was his way of avenging his schoolmates who had died because of his opponent's actions. The blow was so strong that he could no longer move his leg because his spine was broken. And then Lin told his classmate that he had a broken spine, so now it was unknown whether he would ever be able to stand on his feet, and he certainly would not be able to become a psionicist. Wang began to shout that he would tell everything to his father and uncle so that they would kill Luan and his entire family. And then the main character confessed that the Wang family would no longer escape punishment because the teenager had written down his opponent's entire story, so now he had evidence. The guy sent this recording to Lily because it was she who said that if evidence was found, then a case could be opened on the tiger. And while Lin was fighting Tianhao, his friend at that time was also not idle, defeating 2 accomplices of their main enemy. 2 weeks later, Lily informed the protagonist that the Wang family was finished because thanks to the evidence, she was able to start an investigation, and it turned out that this family was in collusion with the criminals. Luan's classmate will never be able to walk again and will also be sent to a juvenile detention center. But Thunder Tiger has no direct connection to the scam, so he could not be brought to justice. And killing a witness doesn't mean anything, because he was the perpetrator, so it doesn't go beyond the scope of his official duties. But the boy shouldn't worry about the tiger because once the man's family was caught in crimes, he won't be able to do anything against the student. After talking to Luan on the phone, Lily approached her teacher who said that Lin was an interesting guy, but in her opinion, he clearly wasn't eager to join the association. Then the teacher told Lily not to rush into her opinion about the guy because he needed to be given time. Meanwhile, the guy had a state exam, the first stage of which is to take a blood test for the presence of psionic energy. All of the classmates told the protagonist that he would definitely not be able to pass the stage with the tests, but it turned out that only Lin Lual and Lu Jiahao from the class passed it, which no one expected. Those who passed this stage were asked to go to the Western basketball court, so the heroes went there. There, the heroes met 3 more students who had passed the first stage, which surprised Lu, because usually 2 people pass from their school, and now 5 people passed. One of those who passed the first stage was Chen Daoji, who showed his worth while still in school, because he had unlimited potential. Also, Ruan Liuxi passed this stage. She was the best in all subjects, attends all the courses at school, and she is very smart. And the third one who also passed was Lin Si, who is an inventor and loves to understand technology. The students did not understand why they had gathered everyone together when none of the teachers came to them, and then they heard some noise. Then they noticed the cat, so they decided that it was the cat that was making the noise. However, then the teenagers saw a man who asked them if they had passed the qualification. The students were surprised by the man's unexpected appearance, because they were waiting for teachers who would explain everything to them. Afterwards, the stranger added that the embryos should be pulled out at the beginning of growth, and then shouted for Lala to go. It turned out that that cat was not a simple animal, because it was the same Lala to whom the man gave the order. The students immediately realized that this was no ordinary cat, but a spiritual beast that they would have to fight. The main character didn't understand why the psionic was attacking them, so he grabbed the phone to call someone. But the man, as soon as he saw the phone in the teenager's hands, said that there was no need to call the police. And then the stranger himself also entered the battle, calling upon his weapons. He was ready to fight. The man used an ability called Rounded Strokes on Luan, and then the boy decided to use his power, but he failed because he didn't have enough points, since the opponent's life force was greater than his own. Lin Luan realized that the strength of the one who attacked them was on par with the Thunder Tiger, so it would be difficult to defeat him. After this, the student shouted to his friend to distract the attacker for a while, and he agreed to help his comrade. Jiahao then told the others to scatter in different directions and try to call the police. After hearing the teenager's plan, the man replied that calling the police was against the rules, so he would not allow them to do so. As soon as the stranger said this, At that very moment, he knocked the phones out of the hands of those who were trying to call. While the others were fighting for their phones, the girl was trying to escape from the cat, which was ready to attack anyone. But the animal was unable to catch up with Liusha because she was saved by the main character, who quickly got his bearings and pushed the cat away. And although the man appreciated the teenager's speed, he was still sure that the student was not able to cope with Lala alone. The cat, meanwhile, had already switched all her attention to the main character, forgetting about the girl she was pursuing. Luan realizes that Lala is as fast as he is, and he only has the ability to run away but not to attack, so if he gets caught, the guy is finished. The student then decided that the only way to defeat the cat was to take control of it by waiting for the right moment, so he allowed Lele to get as close to him as possible. A stranger saw this and started shouting for the guy to move away and for the cat to stop because it was a dangerous moment. And when Lala got close enough for the guy, he used his ability to capture, spending almost all of his points on it. But Lin accepted that winning was more important than the points he had accumulated, so he bit her anyway, spending 1,000 of his points. The man watching this did not understand what was happening and what the student was doing. Lala's list of abilities included perception, flexibility, playfulness, shadow walking, sharp claws, and a Buddha image. Having chosen one of the cat's talents, the guy began to wait for the subordination to work in order to finally calm Lala down. But instead of submitting, the cat turned into a large, unknown beast that was ready to continue the fight. Seeing that things were getting out of control, the stranger ordered Lala to stop, and she became a calm, sweet cat again. Afterwards, the man told the boys to calm down too, confusing everyone he forced to fight. The stranger explained that he only wanted to test and evaluate the students' abilities, and then apologized for scaring them so much. It turned out that this man's name was Gu Yunxiao, and he was the teacher of the boys that his cat fought with. All the students except the main character were crazy about this news, because Yunxiao was the coolest psionicist of their school, because he is a level 5 and is part of the association's preliminary investigation department. According to Luan's friend, their teacher was a scourge of villains, as he had solved countless cases, and he was also handsome and cunning. The man's spiritual energy takes the form of about 10 meters. In his right hand he has a brush, and in his left hand he has a book of life and death. The students were delighted, calling their teacher the beautiful Panguan and talking about how lucky they were. But the psionicist said that the children should simply call him their mentor, and that would be enough. And then the man noted that 5 students had passed this year, and there had never been such a large number before, so the director called the hero to teach. Then the teacher added that the second stage of the exam would take place in half a month, so they should have time to prepare well for it. Meanwhile, the cat did not leave Luan's side, and then the mentor noticed how much Lele liked the boy. Afterwards, Yunxiao suggested that the children move to a special class for training psionicists to discuss the second stage of the exam in more detail. The teacher told the students that supernatural power has several gradations, and there are 7 levels in total, including absorbing, cyclical, manifested, transforming, taking form, chaotic, and spiritual enlightenment. And then Lu noticed that their mentor was already at level 5, even though he was only 25 years old, and there were only a few of them in the association. Yunxiao explained that in fact, it was not worth drawing conclusions about a person's strength based on their level, since the level was more dependent on luck. The mentor took the Thunder Tiger as an example, whose trump card is that he can gather energy in his hand, so he created a technique called Thunder Fist, and we can say that its level is somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd. But since Wang has perfected his technique to the maximum, he is able to break through a mountain. So if he is compared to Yunxiao, the tiger will most likely win. So the association decided to admit that the tiger's strength is equal to the 5th. Therefore, you should not get hung up on just the level, but rather find your own style in using energy, and then create your own personal technique and become the best at what you can do. But it was too early to talk about this, because now the student's task is to concentrate on absorption and cyclicality. Absorption means that one must absorb supernatural power, and the human body absorbs this power gradually. Constant training will help students increase the amount of power they absorb, and after taking a medicine that contains 5% power, teenagers will need a day to absorb it. Luan then asked if the medicine was practically the same as feldspar, and then the teacher said that the concentration of force in the spar exceeds 80%. So it is so dangerous that one can die. The main character was surprised by this information, and then decided that it was thanks to the system that the spar did not have a detrimental effect on him. Next comes the second level called cyclicity, which means that after absorption, the force begins to circulate in the body, strengthening it, allowing a person to surpass his physical capabilities. In theory, It is possible to strengthen all parts of the body, but most people focus on strengthening certain ones to achieve results faster. During these 2 weeks, students will have to take a lot of medication, but they should not be afraid, because the school and the mentor will take care of all the expenses, so the teenagers just need to take advantage of the opportunity. And now that the guys have figured out the theory, it's time to move on to practice. The teenagers began to train a lot, and after they had used up all their strength and taken the medicine, the students trained even more and then more and more and more. The teacher told the children that if they didn't make it to the top of the mountain, which was only 10 kilometers away, they would have to do a long plank. Although everyone no longer had any strength, the main character and his friend suddenly began to compete to see who was faster, which helped them move forward. Thus, the friends reached the top of the mountain together, continuing to argue about who was stronger. Yahello then noted that his friend's progress was very noticeable, even though he said he didn't want to take the exam. But now he was trying so hard, and Lin explained to him that he was trying to become stronger, and not for the sake of the exam, because the guy had not yet even decided whether he wanted to take it at all. After all, if he is going to take the exam, he will definitely fall under the control of the association, and the guy doesn't want that. Because the hero had already told those who were from the association, and practically no one inspired his trust. While the guys were talking, the other students were also gradually reaching the top. However, they were 3 minutes late, so now they have to hold the plank for an hour. And so that Hao and Luan wouldn't just watch their comrades suffer, they were told to keep the others company. The friends first started arguing that they were being forced to do the plank even though they had managed to run, and then Lin asked the teacher if the association was a good place. Then the mentor replied that although the association is not perfect, isn't that why you should try to join it? To make this place better? The teacher himself joined the association when he was 17 years old, and he did so in order to make the association an even brighter place. Although the psionic thought that his speech sounded naive, it really inspired the guys, who wanted to become like their mentor. So all 15 days passed, and then came the second stage of the exam, for which the students were eagerly preparing. Having gathered their strength, the teenagers went to the second round of the supernatural power exam. At this stage, many children from different schools gathered, and this was only a fifth of all the people, because there are 4 more assembly points for the exam. Because of this, the teenagers began to doubt whether they could compete with such a number of people. The unified examination of supernatural power is the main test of skill testing, in which all competitors will undergo 5 types of competitions, including shooting, strength, assault, sensory, and running, each of which can score a maximum of 100 points, and the top 1,200 competitors will advance to the final 3rd round. Before the competition began, all the guys gathered in a self-service cafe where they shared their experiences with each other. And while everyone was worried, Lin Luan ate calmly because the food was free and also delicious. Then Hao decided that his friend was right and told everyone that they needed to eat well to have strength. Then 3 people entered the cafe, one of whom ridiculed Luan for being seemingly always hungry, and Lin, in turn, immediately received 10 points for hostility from Fu Guangkun. The teenager did not understand why he was immediately disliked so much if he had done nothing. It turned out that this guy's father is on the State Development and Reform Committee, and he is Hao's father's boss. Fu Guangkun told the teenagers that it was as if they had come for a free meal rather than an exam, and then added that he did not want to offend anyone, but simply wanted to share his experience. Speaking so that the entire cafe could hear him, Guangkun began to explain that this round would not be so easy. Since last year, some contestants had broken their arms due to improper use of force. Everyone in the cafe started talking about how Guangkun liked to bully other teenagers, so it was a shame for the 5 kids he scared to death. But this guy failed to intimidate the main character, because he saw the strength of his opponent. Knowing that he could use his ability on him, the students suggested measuring their strength when the exam began. Lin decided to make a deal where if he wins, his opponent will wish good luck to Luan's team in front of the entire school. But if the opposite happens, the main character will drop out of school after the exam and never return to it. Hao felt like his friend was crazy because Guangkun was considered the strongest student in his school, and this agreement was too risky. The boy ridiculed Luan for being so confident that he even dared to challenge him. Guangkun was very popular, and when he was challenged to a shooting competition, the other participants began to whisper that the guy was good at every event. The teenager's final shooting score was 87, which was a very good result, but the guy did not show his joy, saying that today's result was acceptable for him. And while this popular young man was thinking that the guy who challenged him had some kind of trump card in his head, He in turn got 42 points in shooting and thought that he was pretty good. Others were very worried about the main character because of his argument, and he showed such a bad result. The participants were then asked to prepare for the strength test competition that was next. Participant number 068, Fu Guangkun, received a final strength score of 89, and the participant number 143, Lin Luan, received only 65 points, which was inferior to his opponent. Therefore, the main character's opponent realized that he was worried about Luan in vain, because he turned out to be too weak. Meanwhile, Lin calmly continued eating, as if nothing had happened, even though he understood that if he lost, he would have to drop out of school. Then the student's friend started scolding him, because how could it be that the boy was 69 points behind but still found time to eat? Luan reassured everyone that they shouldn't lose their enthusiasm just yet, because they could still show others how strong they were. The next test was a sensory test in which all participants had to go into their rooms, which contained 300 rats, and in this task it was necessary to find one rat in which a spar was hidden. And while Lin was thinking that it was his turn to show himself, his rival at the same time decided to sort everything out as quickly as possible, because he considered rats an abomination. And while the participants in the sensory test were asked to go into their rooms, two figures appeared in the background. It turned out that these were not just strangers, but Lily and her mentor, the head of the supervision department, Yang Mu. Lily pointed out to the man the teenager she had told him about earlier, and then asked the teacher if the student would be able to pass this dangerous round. And then the two people met Zhao Chenlin, who is the deputy head of the public security department, and it was with her that the protagonist recently crossed paths. Zhao asked Lily and her boss what they were doing there, to which she responded by explaining her presence by saying that there had been an increase in murders lately, so she was looking around and giving everyone advice. Then a noise was heard on their platform, and it turned out that it was all because someone had passed the test very quickly. At that moment, Guangkun was just coming out, so he decided that all this applause was in his honor, and the guy had already begun to thank the crowd flying towards him, but the people in turn pushed him away, hurrying to someone else. Then the self-confident teenager realized that all these enthusiastic cries were not in his honor, which meant that someone had completed the task faster. It turned out that all attention was focused on Luan, because he found the spar in 10 seconds, while his opponent needed 2 minutes to do so. The main character explained this result by the fact that as soon as the door opened, the rat with the spar immediately ran out to his foot, and he, in turn, instantly caught it. But it doesn't matter how, because Luan won anyway and received 100 points for it, starting to catch up with his opponent. And while Lin was happy with his victory, he didn't even notice that he was approaching the woman he met on the first day of receiving his power. He was so busy thinking about how there were still 2 tests left, which meant that there was still a chance, that he didn't even pay any attention to the stranger who called out to him. And then the girl decided that she was simply mistaken, since she did not receive any reaction. But it turned out that Luan recognized her, but simply did not show any sign. The next test for the participants was a 400-meter race, and it so happened that the main character ended up in the same group as his opponent. Fu Guang was confident that he would win, but then Lin told him that at school he always came first in races. This was the case this time too, as Luan ran faster than everyone else and received 100 points for this test, while his opponent received 75 for it. But the main character's opponent didn't want to believe in his defeat, so he started shouting that the race didn't decide anything, but the next test would definitely be his. And the final test was an assault, in which the participants had to kill as many bats as possible within 5 minutes. And then Fu Guang said that this test was definitely his, because not only was he strong, but Lin was still 22 points behind him. Luan knew that even if he killed one mouse after another, he wouldn't be able to catch the required number in 5 minutes. So he began to think about whether there were any other ways to win. And then the teenager remembered his teacher's words about how to activate his ability by releasing his spiritual energy outward. Lin actually began to release his spiritual energy, thinking that bats were very good at detecting ultrasonic vibrations. Fu Guang noticed that the bats were flying in one direction, so he tracked where exactly the animals were moving. And then he realized that they were all flying towards Luan, surprised that the hero decided to risk his life for the sake of victory, because the bats could easily bite the student. The protagonist's rival tried to save him, shouting for him to quickly hide his spiritual power because there were too many bats, so it would be difficult to defeat them all. Meanwhile, Lin waited until there were enough bats to activate his power, and as soon as the number of mice became very large, the teenager used his power on them all, killing all the mice that surrounded him with a couple of moves. It turned out that Luan had killed a record number of mice and surpassed all the people who had taken the exam before him from all over China. Thus, for the assault, the main character received 99 points, killing 435 mice in 5 minutes, and his total number of points was 406. His opponent received 69 for the assault, and the total number of points was 398. This meant that Lin had won the argument, and his opponent was obliged to fulfill his part of the deal, which included supporting Luan's school. The rest of the students at the protagonist's school were in a different group, and the competition would start for them after lunch, so Lin tried his best to support the kids. As a result, Liu Jiahao received a total of 404 points after all the competitions. Chen Daoji received a total of 341 points, which was not a bad result. Participant Lin Tse received 334 points, falling slightly short of his friend. Ruan Liuxi received a total of 352 points, and since all 5 candidates from the protagonist's school showed such a good result, they all eventually made it to the final round. The teenagers were happy that they had shown such a great result, so they went to celebrate with their teacher. The mentor told the students that the final selection was in 3 days, so they should try not to worry, believe in themselves, and have a good rest. In a good mood, Jiahao saw that he was receiving a call, so he decided to step away for a while to talk on the phone. The teenager's dad called him, and as soon as the boy answered the call, his father said something to him that immediately changed the student's mood. The news reported that there had been an increase in attacks by criminals in the eastern region recently, so all citizens were asked to be more vigilant. Meanwhile, the heroes were checking into a hotel for participants in the final qualifying exam for psionics in the Eastern District, since the final test would take place in a park in the suburbs where the main character and his comrades lived. The students were happy that the competition was taking place in their hometown, so they decided that they should try their best. And then the teenagers' conversation was interrupted by Lin, who asked the others if they had seen Hao. Then everyone decided that the boy had stayed at home, where he had gone on business before. However, the main character was still worried because his friend was not picking up the phone, but then he decided that he would wait a little longer. Luan's patience ran out soon enough, so he hurried to look for his comrade, because he couldn't just disappear the day before the final exam, which was very important to him. The teenager ran to Hao's house and noticed that there were no lights on anywhere, which was very puzzling, because something could have happened. Then Lin went into the house, and after walking around, the teenager found the manager's body in a terrible state in the wine cellar. And then the boy immediately called his mentor to tell him the news that Hao and his family were missing. The student also added that he found the manager, who was dead and looked like a deceased mummy. Then the mentor ordered the teenager to leave this place immediately, and the man himself would send someone to the house in the meantime, since he himself had no opportunity to come. But the main character didn't want to leave, so he decided to wait for the psionic on the spot. And then he heard some noise, deciding that it was the association that arrived so quickly. But it turned out to be an unknown man who spoke on the phone about how he would deal with the body, and then added that he hated covering up other people's tracks. With a displeased look, the man grabbed the corpse by the head with one hand, as if it weighed nothing. After this, the man told the body to disappear and burned it using samadhi fire. The stranger scattered the remaining ashes to the wind, reporting by phone that everything was settled, and a handful of ashes would not be considered evidence, and then said that he would be there soon, having driven off somewhere by car. The main character didn't want to leave his friend in trouble, so he decided to follow the car to find out where the man went. The car was moving quite fast, but Luan kept up with it, wanting to find his comrade, who was now in danger. And this stranger led him to a building that Lin immediately recognized, because it was the trading building of Hao's father. It turned out that there were many people in this place who began to talk about the fact that the leader of the Red Puppets had returned. The first thing the stranger was met by was the criminal Lu Qin, who said that the man had worked hard. Then the unknown man was approached by the criminals Zhao Shuyu and Zhao Shudong, who made it clear to the man that he had been messing around with such an ordinary businessman for a long time. Liu Jiahao's father Lu Tianming was also there, telling the criminals to let his son go and then he would do whatever he wanted. And then Lu Qin told him not to worry, because if he cooperated, no one would get hurt, and then promised that they would sort everything out by tomorrow's lunch. In the end, the attackers did not know where the key to the cage was, and then Shu Yu could not stand it and simply broke it. However, only the father was taken from the cage, and the son was forced to continue sitting quietly in it. One of the criminals said that he and his father would go and sort out some issues, return for dinner, and the rest should behave quietly so that the association's psionics wouldn't come. Then Shuden said that she wanted to go too, but she was still left to watch the hostage. Shuden decided that she was now in charge, so she told the others to do what she wanted, and then ordered a boy with slicked back hair to be brought to her. The girl was immediately obeyed, and a hostage was thrown at her feet for her to look after. After that, Shudong told the boy that his father knew that they were both already corpses, but her sister said that Tianming would agree to cooperate in order to save her son's life. And because of such a heroic act, the girl was so touched that she told the hero that he could run like a homeless dog to call the police because this was his last chance to save himself. And then Shudong added that if her people did catch the teenager, he would be in big trouble. Then the teenager ran, not to save himself, but to save his father. But the guy didn't manage to run far because he was pushed and caught up because he fell. The boy asked to be let go because he wanted to save his father, but one of the villains said that it was not interesting, getting ready to beat the teenager. But the attacker did not have time to do this because Luan came running to his friend's aid, cutting off the man's leg, which he swung at the defenseless student. At this moment, Yahello realized that everything was not so bad now, because at this moment, he was no longer alone, but with a faithful comrade. Lin shouted at the villains not to dare touch his friend, otherwise they would get into trouble. Then Yahello asked what Luan was doing in this place, and the teenager told him the whole situation and how he ended up there. And instead of gratitude, the main character heard screams that it would have been better for him to call the police than to risk his life. And while the friends were arguing, Shudong noticed that Luan's spiritual energy was fluctuating, which meant that his power had awakened not long ago, so they definitely wouldn't be able to escape. And Yahello agreed with her, because the criminals were many times stronger than the teenagers, so Luan shouldn't have come. The main character realized that they really couldn't win that easily, and so he suddenly hit his friend so hard that he lost consciousness. The attackers were very surprised by this outcome, because their opponents must rarely take their allies out of the game. The guy explained this action by saying that since they couldn't win in a regular fight, they needed to resort to an unusual method, because the teenager was ready for trouble and had accumulated a large number of points to use his strength. And when the student was attacked by one of the criminals, the teenager quickly used the ability of subjugation, expecting the result. After this, the boy told the attackers to attack all at once, thinking to subjugate as many people as possible. Laughing at the boy's self-confidence, the criminals rushed towards him in a crowd, not noticing how he began to bite them all in order to then take over their minds. Shuden then began to worry that the boy would be killed too quickly, and she wouldn't even have time to have fun. But then the girl noticed that everyone suddenly stopped fighting and simply stood still, like dolls. The main character was happy, because he had enough points to use the power of subjugation on everyone. With the help of his ability, the guy saw that this girl was the strongest among the others, because to use the ability on her, you had to spend 1,000 points. But luckily for the student, he had 3,000 points, so it was enough for him to zombify Shudong. The girl, meanwhile, thought that the other attackers had stopped in order to allow her to finish off the teenager herself. Luan, meanwhile, ordered all his subordinates to attack the unaware attacker together. Shuden didn't understand what those who were supposed to obey her were doing because they had completely stopped following her orders. When the girl realized that this was not a joke and that the others were really trying to harm her, she immediately turned into a monster, activating her power. And then the attacker shouted at the guy that since he had done something to her henchman, he could now say goodbye to his head. But she was unable to attack because the teenager was protected by one of the villains controlled by Lin. Everyone that the student was controlling also activated their abilities and then attacked all at once, making it much harder for Shudong to fight off everyone. Meanwhile, Luan was thinking that this was the first time he had encountered such a powerful psionic, and that from now on, villains like this girl would appear on the boy's path more and more often. The teenager understood that when he accumulated enough points to activate capture, then he would be able to fight all the villains. But for now, he needed to become stronger. After these thoughts, the boy ordered his slaves to release Shudong so that he could fight her himself. The girl first asked why everyone listened to the guy and not her, and then asked how the teenager was going to overcome her. And then Lin threw the ball, and Shudong could not resist the temptation and ran after him. This made the attacker even more angry because she wanted the student to fight her seriously, and then he asked her why she decided that he was not serious. After all, while the girl was distracted, Lin tried to suddenly attack her, but the villainess was able to dodge. The fight continued in the same spirit, with the two opponents trying to hit each other, but always managing to dodge. Shuden knew that at this rate she would use up all her spiritual power if she continued to remain in animal form. Then the attacker remembered how her sister taught her a technique that could be used to shape one's energy. The criminal decided to do as her sister taught her, to create a spiritual body. Thanks to Shudong listening carefully, she was eventually able to create shadow cats. But the girl understood that she would only be able to hold out like that for 15 seconds. Then the villainess immediately ordered her cats named Grape, Strelka, and Griffin to attack the teenager. It turned out that these clots of energy that Shudong had created would explode on command, and so she ordered them to surround Luan so that he could not escape. The girl's plan worked, because the Shadow Cats were able to quickly surround the hero and explode, so Shudong decided that she had already won this fight. But it turned out that Lin remained virtually unharmed after the explosion, so he struck the criminal again. And this time, Shudong didn't have time to dodge, because she was too surprised by how Luan withstood her attack. The girl did not understand how it happened that the guy remained unharmed after the bombs, because she clearly saw that they hit the teenager. Then Lin explained to the attacker that he had simply managed to copy the ability to harden the skin that one of the girl's accomplices had, so this power protected him. And then the student admitted that he copied more than 20 skills and improved some of them with the help of glasses. And while Shudong was trying to understand what the boy was talking about, he himself added that his rival had already used up all her spiritual energy. So in this battle, victory was Luan's. As the boy approached the attacker, she remembered the words of her sister, who said that girls would no longer tolerate offenders, but would become the strongest psionics. Then the criminal began to cry that Lin should not kill her, because then her sister would be in trouble. The teenager calmed the girl down because he didn't want to kill her, but simply decided to teach her a lesson. And in the meantime, he copied her power called Shadow Cat. And in the end, the guy had only 32 points left. Shudong was very grateful to Luan for not killing her. Having dealt with the girl, the student ordered all his subordinates to go in search of the villains who had left. And in the meantime, Jiahao woke up. The protagonist's friend didn't know what was going on, so he started fighting whoever was currently on their side. After that, the guy found Luan and asked what was going on. And then he thought that he and his friend had simply been captured. Lin told his comrade that he did not remember anything because he was hit by the villains. And then Jiahao decided to act according to the previous plan to defeat all the enemies. And then Luan told his friend that there was no longer any need to fight because the people around them were no longer villains. The student didn't want to reveal his power, so he started to come up with a reason why their enemies had become good on the fly, telling them that they had just had a conversation, and after that the villains admitted their mistakes and wanted to improve. In confirmation of the young man's words, his subordinates began to shout that they realized their guilt and wanted to change. According to Luan, it was because he was simply a great speaker, and that was why he was able to convince all the criminals. And in the end, Jiahao decided that there was no time to deal with this, because he needed to quickly find the 3 criminals who had taken his father somewhere. Lin warned that he had already told the teacher everything, but if help did not arrive in time, he would have to fight the 3 strong attackers himself. No one knew where the cave in which the criminals hid led, because there was no end in sight. Then Jiahao remembered the exam that was about to start, so the guy apologized to his friend for not being able to make it in time. But Luan wasn't as offended as his comrade, because Jiahao had been preparing for him for several years, and Lin didn't really want to be a psionic. Meanwhile, the exam was about to begin, and all the examinees were already ready. Then Luan and Jiahao's comrades began to worry that the boys were still not there, because in that case they might be disqualified as soon as the gates closed. The main character's rival from the previous stage also got to the exam, and he was unhappy that the 2 of them didn't show up, and the guy was going to take revenge on them. East District Mayor Wang Ze has already announced that there are only 10 minutes left before the competition starts, so everyone is asked to review the rules again before the exam begins. Within 4 hours, all participants will need to get to the tower, which is located in the center of the park where everyone was. The competition would be watched by the surveillance department, the security department, and the presidium. And when they were all ready, the final test began. The gates began to open, and all the examinees were already preparing for what they were about to go through. But the main character and his friend never showed up, which made their comrades worry. The absence of the young men was noticed not only by their acquaintances, but also by Lily and her boss, who tried to find the teenagers in the crowd, but without success. But for the students, it was not the time to think about the exam, because first of all, they needed to hurry and save Jiahao's father. Lin knew he would need glasses for the battle, so he ordered the 2 men to do some mischief somewhere to make them hate him. And the main character told the rest that they needed to speed up the pace, but first they needed to develop an action plan. And then they were interrupted by a man whom Luan had already seen at his friend's house when he noticed the tracks. The girl also recognized the attacker, saying that his name was Chi Kui, and then added that he should let everyone through because she wanted to see her sister. Then the criminal said that Shudong was troublesome, and then added that when she got into trouble for this, she shouldn't blame him. Chi Kui did not suspect any trick, and then the girl asked him where they were going, to which he replied that they were searching for treasure. Lin then asked his friend why they had captured his father, and he explained that it was because the man was developing land ownership and was therefore familiar with the area, and the villain needed a guide to search for spiritual stones. But the guys knew that there were few spars in their city, so they didn't understand why the criminals decided to look for something here. And then Luan realized that the villains were heading to the park, because there were a lot of miraculous medicines there that had been prepared for the examinees. Meanwhile, the exam was under strict control, and everyone was watching the fact that only 10 minutes had passed, and already 2 had passed the first obstacles, which means that this year the participants are very strong. Jiahao began to doubt his friend's words, because the exam had serious system security, so going there for the sake of spars was like signing his own death warrant. Also, this year their mentor's group is responsible for security, so it will be almost impossible to achieve results. And while the boys were talking about their teacher, unknown people in hoods came to him. These strangers turned out to be criminals who began to attack the group responsible for security. The psionics didn't have time to react, so the tower that all the participants were aiming for was damaged by the attacker's explosion. The hooded strangers did not stop at one department and went through the rest, causing harm to people in the building. The stranger was asked where Commander Gu was, and he replied that the commander and his men had all already been defeated. Then the guards from the assembly point of the district security unit tried to contact the people in the tower. The villain heard this and told the others to answer the guards and let them know that everything was under control, so there was nothing to worry about. And then the district chief conveyed that everything was fine and nothing unusual, so everyone should return to their positions. The attacker noted that the boss values his personality much more than the lives of those participating in the test. Lily and her mentor realized that something was wrong, so the girl used her power of invisibility and quietly hid from the criminals. Meanwhile, the district chief asked the villains who they were and what they were going to do. And then the criminal asked if anyone remembered the incident when the city of Chao was destroyed 8 years ago, and in response to this, he received only silence. Then the villain decided to remind everyone. Before the incident, the Supernatural Power Association only existed in the eastern region, and not like now, scattering its branches around the world. And then Chao City, the ghetto of the eastern region, was captured and then destroyed by the Thick Fog Group. 1,375 residents died in that event, and since the association was initially an unofficial organization, it was unable to arrive at the scene in time. The man rose from a pawn of the administration to the head of the eastern region because his fiery speech ignited a fire in the hearts of the people, which led to the official recognition of the association, which soon turned into an industrial giant. However, the attacker doubted that everything in this story was clear. After this, the storyteller was informed that Lu Qin had arrived, so the man interrupted his reasoning about the story he had told. The commander gave the order for the scammers to begin, and they responded that they understood everything and would act in a coordinated manner. Then Jiahao's father asked the villains if they could finally let him and his son go, since he had done as they wanted and brought them right under Shigong Park. At this moment, a third criminal approached the 2 criminals, bringing with him a crowd controlled by Luan, as well as himself and his friend. Jiahao was about to rush towards his father, but his comrade stopped him, as it was too early to reveal their plan. Meanwhile, Shuyu scolded her sister because she had been given an order, which she disobeyed. But at that moment, Lu said that it was even good that they came. Otherwise, he would have had to go a long way to replenish his energy reserves. And he suddenly grabbed one of Luan's slaves, and no one had time to do anything, because everything happened too unexpectedly. And then the man who was captured began to quickly dry up, turning into a mummy. Qin, meanwhile, threw the body away, and then said that it was not enough for him and he was still hungry. The swindler began to look around in search of a new victim, and then turned his attention to Jiahao's father, beginning to reach out his hand towards him. And at that moment, Jiahao himself could not resist and struck the attacker, saving his father. The man was very surprised to see his son there, and he, in turn, apologized for helping only now. While his friend was busy with the dialogue, Lin ordered all his puppets not to wait, but to attack the opponents together. And just as the fight was just beginning, Luan ordered his friend and his father to quickly leave here, because at the moment it was possible. But as it turned out, Lu Qin was not upset by the fact that their loved ones had rebelled. The criminal simply began to absorb the energy of everyone who tried to fight him. Shudan also wanted to get involved in the fight, but her sister wouldn't let her, not understanding what was happening to the girl. Luan realized that the scammers were targeting the exam takers' gathering place, so he needed to immediately inform the people in the central tower. The villains in the tower, meanwhile, were told to take all the psionic reagent they needed. But the leader of the criminals replied that they didn't need the reagent at all, but all the examinees who were currently in the park. And then all the teenagers who were taking the exam saw a large number of rats and bats that were approaching them. The children were very surprised by this turn of events because they were not warned that the animals from the previous stages would also be in the final. There were so many mice and rats that the students had no idea how to fight them off. It turned out that the animal attack was the fault of the spirit of the beast of the primordial chaos, and because of this, all the participants were surrounded. Therefore, because of the rats and mice, the teenagers were forced to rush to the tower as quickly as possible to escape. Lily, meanwhile, tried to call at least someone who could help her save her teacher and the others by stopping the attackers. The main character's comrades were also running away from the animals, and then the girl tripped over a stone and fell, so that the mice and rats began to approach her. But the animals were unable to catch up with the heroine, because Fu Guangkun came to her aid and killed all the creatures that tried to attack the student. And then the 4 examinees were left to be torn apart by the animals that surrounded them. The former rival shouted at the others to try to run away if they didn't want to die. And then a shadow cat appeared in the distance. And then a voice could be heard telling Vinogradinka to go forward. The cat approached the students and exploded with bright colors, frightening everyone around. It turned out that this cat was summoned by Lin Luan to save his comrades from the animals. Then the others began to question the main character, but he interrupted them, saying that now was not the time for chatting, because at the moment they needed to run. After that, Luan ordered everyone to escape through the underground passage that the intruders had used before, but now they were not there, and then Guangkun asked what to do about the exam. The student then explained to his opponent that the exam was not the most important thing to think about right now. At the same time, one of the examinees said that these were just mice and rats, so they would have to deal with them. But this guy had to fight not only with animals, but also with an attacker who used a technique called fire taste on the boy. The villain said that in a group there would always be 1 or 2 people like this student who would take the initiative, making noise and causing trouble for others. And the way out of such a situation is very simple, because you just need to eliminate the initiators, and then the rest will immediately scatter. Everyone really did start to panic right away, and the man shouted after them that the students wouldn't run away from him. Meanwhile, the tower guards stood motionless, not moving from their places, as they had been ordered by their superior. Meanwhile, Lily tried to explain to the men that they had an emergency, because the tower had been taken over by criminals. The villain's plan worked, and all the examinees ran to the tower in the hope of being saved, which they ultimately did not receive. Then one of the attackers reported to his commander that all the students were assembled. The leader replied that he understood everything, and then added that after 8 years he would finally be able to make the matter public. After this, the man turned to the administrative workers and said that they should know the other side of the fall of the city of Chao. The attacker said that on that occasion she arrived late to the association on purpose in order to provoke the public and obtain the necessary status. The association's acquired power cost the lives of 1,375 Chao residents. The criminal said that he wanted to pull out the weed, meaning association, by the roots, and the examinees were chosen by him as revolutionaries. Then Lily's mentor wondered what this psycho wanted to do with the children. Luqian asked his commander if they could finally begin their plan, and then it seemed to all the students that some kind of earthquake had begun, because the ground began to move out from under their feet. But it turned out that it was not an earthquake, but a large monster that crawled out from under the ground. It was a worm called a crown gear, and it was so huge that it carried away many of the students. The criminal then asked the others if they were familiar with this type of worm, which required a lot of effort to fatten up. This monster releases a mist-like strand that, when inhaled, produces a stupefying effect that, while not effective against psionics, is fine for beginners. Then Lily's mentor began to scold the criminal, asking if he realized what he was going to do to ordinary children. After this, the man added that the military unit already knows what is going on in the tower, so it would be better for the villains to just leave and let the children go. But the attacker was not so simple, because he noticed that Lily had left, and he calmly let her go, because help would not arrive in time anyway. The criminal understood that by the time the rescue team arrived, the villains would already be able to do their job. After this, the worm was ordered to begin, and it began to do everything as the criminal had described earlier. The students inhaled this fog and did not understand what it was and what was happening to them. And then the criminal noticed that the monster had stopped, and he couldn't understand why this had happened, because the worm had eaten enough of the reagent to give it a lot of strength. The students also began to notice that the fog had stopped appearing, and it also seemed as if the monster was in pain. And then the worm said that he couldn't take it anymore, because it was so disgusting here. It turned out that even the criminals themselves did not know that this worm could talk, because they were very surprised by this fact. Then the worm started screaming that he wanted to get out, and then he screamed something about a fierce claw. Half an hour ago, the main character and his comrades were running away from criminals and trying to get to the exit, where they would be safe. Here the heroes thought about what would happen to the rest of the examinees, and this thought made Luan stop. After this, the guy said that he had a strong call from nature and ran away, promising to return. The others tried to call the teenager to stop, but to no avail. Then the friend of the runaway boy said that the boy knew what he was doing, so he could go. The student understood that he currently had few points, so it would be difficult for him to beat anyone, so he needed to earn more quickly. The teenager's subordinates did everything they could to make themselves hated, because they behaved terribly in public, telling the endings of films and pretending to be exhibitionists. And then the young man began to feel waves of spiritual power, realizing that they were from the reagents prepared by the Association for the Examinees, so he decided to find the warehouse, which should be somewhere nearby. Here the guy noticed a large worm crawling out of the ground, which the student definitely did not expect to see. The teenager did not understand where this disgusting worm came from in the park, because he had never seen anything like it before. But the guy thought that this worm did not pose any threat and looked quite friendly. But it was not to be, because this monster suddenly opened its mouth, showing the boy that it clearly posed a threat. After this, the monster soared upward, wanting to attack the young man, jumping on him. But the worm didn't manage to eat the student, because he reacted in time and dodged. And while Lin was thinking about how the worm obviously belonged to the villains and why it was so big, the monster itself disappeared somewhere, and then it dawned on the teenager that the worm had not disappeared, but had gone underground. But the boy realized this too late, because the creature was already underneath him with its mouth open. Just as the boy had time to think that he was finished, the monster's mouth slammed shut and he was eaten. So Luan found himself inside the worm, but he remained alive, because among the abilities he copied was a defensive one, but he didn't know how long he could hold out like that. The student decided to rip his guts out using an ability called the Fierce Claw, but then the boy decided that if this monster belonged to the criminals, then he could wait in the belly until the worm itself delivered Luan to the villains. Although the plan was good, the main character had to endure a place that was disgusting for him to be in. Then the guy felt that the worm was crawling somewhere, and then he heard the voices of other guys. It was then that the boy decided that it was time to activate the Fierce Claw and kill the monster from the inside. Thus, the main character killed the monster that could harm a large number of children. As soon as Lin finally got out of the worm, he began to curse at the war that was going on here, and then said what an abomination this worm was. The main criminal ordered the others to grab the guy who had ruined all their plans. Meanwhile, Luchin ran to treat the worm, calling it by the name Lady Hool. Shuyu meanwhile turned into a beast, screaming that she would not allow some boy to interfere with them. However, the girl was interrupted by her sister, forcing her to stop in order to protect Luan. And since no one was going to catch the boy, it had to be done by the man, who was not happy about it, because it was too much of a hassle for him. The leader of the criminals, meanwhile, asked how much time it would take to completely cure the monster. Then Luchin replied that it would take him about 10 minutes, which did not please his boss at all, because the main attacker understood that they hardly had these 10 minutes, because soon other psionics would come running to help the guys. And so the man ordered his subordinates to try to delay the approaching warriors as long as possible in order to gain time. Meanwhile, Lily's mentor looked at Luan, thinking that he had noticed this young man a long time ago. Meanwhile, Lin saw a villain who controlled fire, and the teenager decided that this attacker was currently the biggest danger to him. Then someone called the boy's name, which made Luan feel surprised because he didn't understand whose voice it was. The man then introduced himself as Lily's mentor, and then explained to the boy that his ability would help them communicate telepathically. The mentor told the boy that help would arrive in 15 minutes, and in the meantime, Lin would have to try to detain the attackers. The main character said that he would definitely cope with this task, because a lot depended on it. The villain, meanwhile, could not keep up with Luan, thinking that the guy was running like a cheetah. The attacker then attempted to attack the teenager with a wave of fire that was large enough to reach the boy. And although Lin managed to dodge, the man's flame flares up and goes out at his will, so it will be difficult for the student to escape from the fire that surrounded him. And then the young man began to say that he was still a complete newbie, an ordinary student, so the man needed to be easier with him. But the villain didn't really care about the guy's words, so he used an ability called Heat Wave on him. However, the teenager didn't even have to dodge because he used a block and a protective field. Thanks to the abilities that Lin had copied earlier, he was now able to give at least some resistance to the intruders. But even with the use of both forces together, the young man could not resist the blow of the criminal. The boy understood that if his opponent struck in all seriousness, he would not be able to withstand it, and Luan did not have enough points to bite. The guy avoided the blows as best he could because he understood that if anything happened, it would be very painful for him. And then a cat named Strelka exploded behind the attacker, which turned out to be an unexpected move for him. And then the boss told the villain not to stay too long, because the teenager was deliberately stalling for time. And while the man was dealing with the leader, Luan was able to disappear from sight, which caused even more trouble for the criminal. The attacker thought that the guy had decided to hide above, so he struck the trees. However, it was not a student there, but another shadow cat from whom the noise came. And while the man was distracted by the cat, Luan decided to strike him from behind while he still had the opportunity. Finally, the young man made it clear to the attacker that he was going to not only stall for time, but also defeat the criminal. But unfortunately, the teenager's blow was not enough to defeat the villain, so the attacker then pushed the boy away from himself. And then Lin heard the voice of the mentor, who said that it was too early to think about victory, because now it was much more important to win time, and then victory would definitely remain with the heroes. And although the teenager understood this, he still wanted to defeat the villain, noticing that he needed less and less points to bite. The student realized that the number of points needed to capture an enemy was determined by the enemy's vitality, and therefore it could decrease if the vitality was low. The young man understood that if he lowered the attacker's points a little more, then he would be able to use the power of capture on him. The mentor noticed the hero's tenacity, which would allow him to gain even more time than expected. And while Luan was trying to stall for time, Lu Qin was able to completely cure the worm, which was already ready to continue. Shi Lily and the other operatives were already rushing to help, however. They met someone on their way. It was the detachment of those who attacked the building. They blocked the path of our fighters. One of the unknown hooded men, apparently the leader of the squad, told Lily that entry was prohibited here. Meanwhile, the examinees looked up and one of them shouted in panic that the worm had recovered. The guy controlling the worm laughed and said that it happened because he was not paying attention, but it would not happen again because he would guard the worm, and in 5 minutes, they would all be under his control. The old man heard this speech and lowered his eyes, realizing that they were too late. Meanwhile, Luan continued to fight. He fell to the ground, burning from the previous attack. At this moment, Lu Qin raised his head to the sky and commanded the worm to begin its attack. However, nothing happened, and the worm began to make strange sounds similar to the sounds of pain. Lu Qin approached and saw a strange silhouette in his pet's stomach. He realized that there was someone there. Luan shouted that the time had come and ordered Griffin to explode. At that moment, the shadow kitten in the worm's body exploded, and the monster's belly flew apart, forming a huge hole. Lu Qin was furious because he had just cured his pet. Yang Mu chuckled as he watched this. The old man called the guy a genius, because Luan had managed to leave an assistant in the worm back then. The red-haired guy could hardly stand on his feet, but he was glad that everything went exactly according to plan. Zhao Chenlin smiled as she watched the fight. After all, the guy was not bad. Meanwhile, the unknown leader of the attackers was furious that their plans were being thwarted. The fight continued. Luan was getting hit in the face more and more by his opponent. The man smiled because he understood that he was winning the fight. He advised the kid to surrender because he was no match for him. And Luan stuck to his tactics. He looked at the system window which said that 1100 points were needed to capture, and now he had 1104. The time had come. The hero suddenly stood up and thunder rumbled around him. Luan activated Shadow Walk at full power. At that very moment, he ran at the speed of sound towards the enemy, who was confident of his victory. However, from somewhere incomprehensible, another attack was directed towards Luan, not typical of his opponent. The hero managed to stop in time and dodge her. An unknown person in a green cloak appeared in the air. The passionate guy immediately recognized him and said that he would sort this out himself. However, the unknown person did not answer a word. He then looked towards Luan and said in a rage that he had no idea how much he had ruined their plans. Luan raised his head and asked the stranger to stop. He asked teacher Gu Yunxiao to stop. At that moment, the stranger's eyes opened wide. He did not expect such an answer. Luan continued. He said that he didn't tell Hao and the others that the killer was their teacher, because right now they are going through a very difficult time, and they wouldn't be able to stand it if they heard this truth. The man's hands were shaking. He told the boy that he didn't understand what he was talking about, and he didn't know who this Gu Yunxiao was. Luan shouted that he himself did not want to admit it, but all the threads lead to this, no matter how much he did not want to. Firstly, the teacher had come specifically to their school half a month in advance, although there were few of them there, which was too lenient for a person of his level, and all because it was decided to hold the exam near Wenchang. Afterwards, Lu Qin and the other criminals kidnapped Hao's father, knowing exactly when he was not at work, and entered the exam site unhindered, indicating that their accomplice was already there. When Luan discovered them, he first informed the teacher, but the night passed and reinforcements still had not arrived. The rats and mice that were part of the second round were taken under control, and they began to surround the examinees at the right time. And finally, the tower was captured, and the communication routes were blocked, and only one man could have done all this with such ease. Only the commander of the guard detachment, Gu Yunxiao, Luan's teacher, could do this. After listening to the story, the man smiled and replied that this was a very excellent chain of conclusions. But the guy was wrong. After all, Gu Yunxiao was dead. An unknown man personally strangled him with his own hands. Luan just looked pitifully at the man who was trying to hide the truth. The guy ordered Lael to show himself. At that moment, a cute black cat appeared from the chest of the hooded stranger. The cat jumped out and ran to Luan's feet, and the boy simply watched it. There was no point in hiding it anymore. The stranger couldn't believe that he had been found out. He took off his hood, and Gu Yunxiao appeared in front of the guy. He asked how long Luan had suspected him. Meanwhile, a battle was starting outside the exam venue, and one of the support squad decided to use his hurricane ability. At that very second, powerful gusts of wind struck the unknown. A strong gust of wind blew their hoods off, and Lily recognized them. This was the association's 6th investigation team, Gu Yunxiao's squad. Lily started screaming and asking what they were doing here. Were they crazy? But the girl from the 6th group shouted that the entire association should die for what happened to Chao. Meanwhile, Luan asked his teacher to stop before it was too late. His teacher replied that the boy knew nothing, and that they were only here to do justice. That day in Chao, each of them lost their relatives. At that moment, an unknown girl flashed through the mentor's memories. He began to concentrate his power and said that he had been training for 8 years to kill those responsible for what happened, who were blissfully unpunished. And that is why today they must take revenge on the association. We are transported back in time to an old dilapidated barracks, where a female voice asked the children if their test results had arrived. Little Yunxiao boasted that he had the highest score in all subjects except physical training. But even that could be improved with a reagent, or so his teacher told him. The children's mother was happy for her son and asked his sister how her results were. The girl puffed out her cheeks and replied that she had lost her certificate. The brother immediately shamed his sister by saying that she had terrible grades there, so she lost her certificate, to which the sister replied that in any case, she would remain his older sister for 2 whole minutes. The brother and sister were twins, and at that very moment they began to fight to find out who was older. But their mother calmed them down. A little later, the mother told Yunming that if her brother continues in the same spirit, then there is a high probability that he will be taken into psionics, and the only problem is his physical abilities, which he can improve with a reagent, but it is very expensive. Their father left them a long time ago, and the mother was afraid that she would not be able to cope. The girl smiled and replied that she would drop out of school because her grades were low anyway, and her education was a waste of money. She would get a job and help her brother get into the school for psionicists. And so it happened. The little girl worked at different jobs, she cleaned up the trash, and in the evening, her brother asked what she was doing that it smelled so bad. At one of her jobs, she washed dishes at night, and in the morning she cooked breakfast for her brother, who told her that he was in a hurry, and the girl overslept again. In her 3rd job, she worked as a courier and delivered an order in the pouring rain, and her brother later woke her up, telling her that she was lazy and it was time for her to get up. The poor girl was absolutely exhausted, but she knew what she was trying for. And one fine day, Yunxiao burst into their house with the words that he had been accepted into the specialty of psionics. The boy was very happy, and his mother praised him for being a good boy. The brother leaned towards his sister and said that now she should understand who is better. Yunming replied that it was only because she did not go to the exam. Yunxiao confirmed her words and said that she would simply be wasting her time if she went there. The girl just looked at her brother silently and didn't know what to answer, keeping her hand in her pocket. The boy's uncle came into the family's house and asked if the boy had really passed the exam. Mother confirmed that this was true, and they began to celebrate. Everyone around said that Xiao would become the strongest psionic. The boy was a little embarrassed, but he was sincerely happy that everyone around him was praising him and that he was the best. His older sister watched everyone rejoice for her brother and clutched something in her hand, some leaflet that once seemed very important. After some time, the city of Chao was destroyed. A tearful Xiao screamed the name of his sister and mother as he tried to find them under the rubble. He shouted their names more and more furiously and tried with all his might to clear away the collapsed house. At that moment, a bloody body appeared from under the rubble. It was his older sister, Min. Xiao shouted his sister's name and tried harder to pull her out from under the rubble. But suddenly, with his tear-stained eyes, the boy noticed a strange piece of paper that his dead sister was clutching. The unfortunate boy pulled it out of Min's hands to take a look. What he saw he could not have imagined. He remembered his sister's words, who said that she had lost her certificate, and that she would drop out of school and help her brother with admission to the school of psionicists. And he also remembered that he said that this was the right decision because she would have wasted her time. In Min's hand was her certificate, which showed that she had the highest score in all subjects. Xiao burst into tears. Only now did he understand what his sister had done for him. She sacrificed her future for the sake of her beloved younger brother, who now sits next to her corpse. 2 years after joining the association, Xiao accidentally stumbled upon the truth about what happened in Chao back then. Just one note, that an incident in Chao was discovered and instructions to do nothing for the time being. That is why now he will make every resident whose hands are stained with the blood of Chao pay for what they did. It is time to eradicate the association. Luan shouted to the teacher that he had once said that he wanted to change the association for the better. However, his hatred-filled teacher had already raised his brush to summon an ink cell. At that very second, drops of magic ink fell near the boy and the cat. Suddenly, the spots rushed upward and formed a dense cage that held the hero. Xiao ordered Luan to sit here and not try to disturb him. The teacher turned around and ordered Qi to help the other troops deal with the reinforcements and buy them time. However, the fiery brute first wanted to deal with the guy who ran like a beast and was now immobilized. An enraged Xiao turned around and reminded him what he told him to do. Qi was frightened by the leader's gaze and replied that he understood the order. Luan tried to break the cage, but he soon realized that he couldn't overcome it at the moment. However, suddenly someone appeared next to him. The guy raised his gaze to see who it was. It was an enraged Zhao Shuyu who wanted to kill the guy for what he did to her sister. At that moment, Luan realized that he was finished. At the same time, the battle that took place outside the exams had already dragged on and everyone was tired. The blonde man from the defense squad ordered his opponents to surrender. After they saw that the guys were exhausted and rushed forward, the blonde ordered his subordinates to surround the tower and save the examinees. However, suddenly he heard something and strange spots appeared in the sky. In an instant, they were hit by paint strikes that were so sharp that they pierced the ground. In the sky before them, there he was. The blonde recognized this person. It was Gu Yunqiao. He warned his soldiers of the danger and advised them to be 120% attentive. After all, their enemy is not just a soldier, but a legendary fighter nicknamed the Beautiful Panguan. At that very moment, the enraged Xiao uses one of his abilities, Buddha's Panguan. Meanwhile, Luan begged the girl to understand him correctly because he didn't do anything to Qingni. They were decent people. However, the angry girl did not listen to him. She said that the guy was very good at talking, but unfortunately, it would not help him. Suddenly, her sister appeared behind her and shouted at Shuyu not to touch him. She raised her hand to her throat and threatened that if she killed the guy, she would say goodbye to life. The girl burst into tears and shouted that the problem was that she belonged to Luan. The sister didn't expect to hear these words, and Luan was shocked. Shuyu became even more furious and shouted that the guy was definitely finished now. Meanwhile, Xiao finished the fight and the Buddha projection disappeared. The entire team that was moving to help the students was bound by the power of the leader of the rebellion. The blonde man raised his head with difficulty and said that Beautiful Panguan was very much mistaken. The boy turned around and replied that he would spare his life so that he could see the beginning of the changes with his own eyes. He contacted Lu Qin and asked how their worm was. The guy replied that everything was fine and this time everything would work. At that moment, the worm sprayed poisonous clouds and all the examinees fell into a strange sleep, as if they were under control. An old man watched all this from a safe distance. He couldn't believe that all they could do was watch as the disciples were taken under control. At times like these, Yang Mu hated himself for not being able to fight anymore. The old man turned to the girl and said that now there was only her clone who could exchange information with others so that they could call for help. The girl answered the sage that she had already done everything. But the problem was that due to recent events, a large number of squads had gone on missions and in addition, Xiao had scattered smoke bombs everywhere. In short, the only possible reinforcement now is the Red Shell Squad. She asked the old man if he thought it was good or bad if they came here. The old man just bowed his head and said nothing. Meanwhile, Xiao ordered preparations to lift the siege when he heard that the examinees had been taken under control. The old man considered the decision regarding the Red Shell. Now there is still a chance to save and restore the students. But if they are taken away, then there is nothing that can be done to help them. So even if there are casualties, it is still better than being completely defeated. Chenlin smiled sweetly and replied that she had already made a request for their transfer and they should arrive any minute now. A red glow suddenly appeared over the battlefield. Xiao turned around, feeling a strange pressure. Meanwhile, Shuyu swung at Luan in anger. However, she did not strike him, but attacked the bars of the cage around the guy, which began to disperse. At that moment, the girl grabbed the hero by the shirt and pulled him towards her. She told Luan that if he let Chinny down, she would bite his throat out. In any authorized organization, a critical moment can arise that can lead to a clash, and it is at such times that the need for a secret weapon arises, and the red shells were such a weapon for the association, which do not exist for the sake of fighting for justice, but with a specific purpose, and now their purpose is to defeat 12 criminals. One of the Red Warriors said that the boys were holding the examinees hostage, and he wanted to know what they should do with them, to which the commander replied that he did not know about any examinees. Xiao looked up and heard the order to attack from unknown enemies. These were the red troops that hung in the air in front of the rebels. The blue-haired girl shouted to the commander that they could fight them together. However, the commander did not listen to her, and his hand instantly appeared in front of them. A rift appeared in front of the squad, and they did not understand why the captain shielded his squad from himself. Xiao replied that their goal was to take the examinees away and fight the association then, not right now, so his squad should take the students away along the planned route. In the meantime, he will delay the association. The commander of the Red Warriors asked the boy if this was his final choice. Suddenly, Chi-Kui appeared and tried to attack the red shell and burn them all to ashes. But the ardent guy was intercepted by the huge hand of the Buddha commander. He threw it at the squad and shouted that they had to leave. That was an order. The Red Warrior said that Xiao was worthy of being a commander, and he would be a good opponent. If he hadn't helped Chi-Kui, he would have been dead by now because this battle was beyond his abilities. The desperate rebel commander grinned and asked if it was too presumptuous to say so. After all, their battle is rather beyond the capabilities of the red shell. A huge blue spirit appeared before the red squad, emanating from the boy's body. Luan also noticed a huge projection of the teacher Buddha. The guy remembered that he had a connection with the old man and asked if he was still here. The old man confirmed the hero's words, to which the boy asked whether his teacher was a good or a bad person. Yang Mu thought about it. It was a difficult question because everyone had their own reasons for doing one thing or another, and he didn't want to judge Xiao's choice. So he decided to tell Luan Xiao's whole story so that he could draw his own conclusion. Once upon a time, there was a boy who was driven by a sense of justice and talent. Everyone believed that he was capable of becoming a hero, and if he had a flaw, it was rooted in his very birth. After all, this boy was born surrounded by poverty. The Buddha projection struck first, trying to reach the enemy with his huge staff. The commander said that the lovely Pangguan was a worthy opponent and had amazing skills, but his only weakness was his attack range. After these words, he ordered the first unit to surround the guy. The Red Warriors pointed their hands towards Xiao, and a strange chain shot out from them. A chain with hundreds of knives from different sides flew towards the rebel commander at great speed. At that moment, chains as sharp as rose thorns grabbed Xiao and immobilized him. The Red Shell commander said that they would now tear him to pieces. The rebel raised his head and replied that he could not dream of it. The guy, through the pain, raised his hands into the air and began to spin the spear. At that moment, his colossal projection exactly repeated the movements of the creator. After that, Xiao struck the ground, and his projection did the same, creating a destructive wave. Some of the Red Warriors could not withstand the force of the blow and were thrown back. The commander of the Red Shells shouted that while Xiao was attacking, he was vulnerable and that he needed to be attacked right now. The second unit didn't wait and immediately began to attack the guy with the Hammer of Heaven skill. Xiao raised his hands up and tried to defend himself from them. At this moment, he only wanted Lu Qin to quickly take the disciples away. Meanwhile, the group of students under control were leaving in an unknown direction. The commander ordered his soldiers not to stop and to wear down the enemy. Shillili was watching all this, and she couldn't understand why Gu Yunxiao was protecting the others while the Red Army was beating him to death. At this time, Luan was already rushing to help. He said that his mother told him about the destruction of the city of Chao. Meanwhile, the teacher's strength was already running out. The commander noticed that Buddha was weakened. Now was the best time to attack. But suddenly the shadows of different people appeared in front of Xiao. It was his squad that came to the rescue. They decided to defend the commander to the last. Xiao shouted at the top of his lungs that he ordered them to leave. But the guys disobeyed and rushed to attack. One of them said that if it weren't for Xiao's leadership, there would be no point in their rebellion, and they swore on their lives to be with him until the end. The Red Warrior just laughed at this, because after the battle they had no supernatural power left. The two squads clashed, the Red Shell and Gu Yunxiao's squad. They remembered the commander's words that their goal was to take the examinees away, because the enemies were very strong psionics of the association and there was no need to oppose them and die. But it was too late. At that very second, the entire rebel detachment was brutally killed. The wounded Xiao screamed at the top of his lungs for them to run away. Sharp thorns pierced the blue-haired girl's chest. At that moment, the red chain of death cut her in half right in front of Xiao's face. The commander's eyes filled with tears. All the people who were with him until the end and believed in him were killed by the association again. The commander of the Red Warriors was surprised that the guy still had strength. He felt that the atmosphere had become more dangerous. Xiao's rage knew no bounds. All his rage began to take physical form. He screamed and cried at the top of his voice, and from such shock, a new version of Buddha was born. Xiao looked into the eyes of his enemies and shouted that he would kill them all. Suddenly, someone called him, calling him commander. Xiao was surprised and turned around. It was Lu Qin, one of his troop, who was leading the disciples away. She couldn't understand what he was doing here, because he should be with the students now. The Red Warrior gave the order to begin. At that very second, the guy's hand, in the center of which was a huge mouth, reached out to Xiao. The guy pierced the white-haired rebel's body right through. The pale killer looked up and, smiling, asked his former commander for forgiveness. The moment he pulled his hand out of Xiao's body, Luan and Qingni came running. The hero was shocked by the picture he saw. The traitor's hand gradually began to suck the energy out of Xiao's body. The hidden boy smiled and told the commander that it was all over now. Xiao, who was coughing up blood but was still conscious, couldn't believe that he had been betrayed. Lu Qin jumped away from the rebel, and Xiao was still standing even with such a severe wound. The guy in the hood said that he waited until the commander had no strength left because his ability is not so good at recovery. One of the Red Warriors asked if this guy was a traitor, to which the other Red Warrior replied that he was not. He was originally their man. Lu Qin unbuttoned his jacket and pulled out a red badge that looked like a shield. Xiao immediately recognized him. It was a sign of association. Now he understood that Qin was one of them. Since everything was revealed, the guy decided to introduce himself. He is a spy of the secret department of the Red Troops. He was assigned to Commander Xiao 2 years ago. The association immediately realized that something was wrong with Xiao, a native of Chao City. Talented, extremely stubborn, with a strong sense of justice, such a person could not simply be allowed to occupy a high position without insurance. Then they discovered 2 years ago that he and the 6th Squad were plotting something against them, but they did not dare to stop them immediately due to lack of evidence. After all, they were extremely cautious and also very capable guys. It would have been extremely wasteful not to take advantage of their talents. After hearing the whole story, Xiao rushed to attack Lu Qin. The guy only regretted that until today they had helped them very well. He then gave the order to the Red Warriors to finish them all off. While Xiao was fighting the warriors, Qin thanked him for treating him well, and thanks to the commander, the boy became stronger and grew in his abilities. He smiled darkly and inhumanly, saying that Xiao was an ideal commander. Exhausted and wounded, Xiao continued to fight off the enemies in every possible way on his own. It seemed that he was holding on only by his unbending strength of spirit. Qin said that all these students that Xiao planned to take with him to raise as rebels, he could still take with him. After all, his department in the Red Army needs spies. But the whole world will only know that the criminal Gu Yunxiao and his squad kidnapped them. The traitor's words irritated the former commander more and more. He used his internal energy and pushed back all the Red Warriors. After that, bleeding profusely, he rushed towards Lu Qin. However, the pale guy easily repelled the attack by piercing the rebel's chest. After all, in his current state, Xiao cannot resort to the face of Buddha, but his disciple is full of strength. Blood began to spurt from the man's mouth. Qin said that it was time to die and threw Xiao away. The fighter for justice crashed into the trees and then fell to the ground without any strength. Luan shouted his teacher's name as he saw him land. He, the cat, and the girl ran up to the dying Xiao. Luan couldn't believe what happened because his teacher was such a strong fighter. Someone in the distance ordered to finish off the rebel. Luan raised his head and realized that these were the Red Warriors who were approaching. He looked at his teacher again and told him to be patient for a little while, and the boy would figure out how to heal his wounds. Suddenly, Xiao began to speak slowly. He asked himself in a whisper whether he was right. Tears appeared in the teacher's eyes, and he asked if he had killed them all, his entire squad, which was loyal to him. Xiao realized that he remained a simple fool until the very end. Drowning in tears, he told Luan that he repented. Qinni shouted that the troops were coming, and Luan told the teacher that he did not approve of his actions, but he was also disgusted by what the association had done. He remembered the way the teacher looked when he said that if their world was not perfect enough, he would do everything he could to change it. One of the Red soldiers noticed the children and the rebel. Luan said that he would help him finish what he started and walk his path in his place. The Red Warrior looked at Luan and asked who he was. Luan just looked at his sign, which said that the enemy could be captured, and he bit. The boy got up from his knees and asked the girl to find a way to cure the teacher. The warriors realized that this guy was a student, but he heard their conversation, so he needed to be eliminated. At this moment, the system reported that the copying was complete. Buddha Pangguan, maximum level. Luan's hair began to turn from red to ash. Then, when they became completely ashen like Xiao's, he said that instead of the teacher, he would turn the association upside down. The Red Warrior looked at the guy and did not understand what was happening. At the place where Luan stood, a red explosion of unprecedented power instantly formed. As Lu Qin was leaving with his red friends, he heard something strange and turned around. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. In front of him stood the Red Buddha of Pangwan. He couldn't believe that Xiao was still alive. Luan took the first step towards his enemies. The pale boy panicked and ordered his red warriors to capture and destroy him. And our hero, who looked like Xiao, rushed towards Lu Qin. Luan shouted that his teacher was kind and left them alive, but he would spare no one. The Buddha's projection summoned his staff to attack. He then struck the ground, a huge red energy of pure rage piercing the ground and destroying everyone within the radius. Lu Qin watched as his soldiers died one after another, and something red rushed straight towards him. He didn't have time to react before Luan's fist flew into his face. The force of the blow was so great that the guy rolled several meters before he stopped. His face was smashed to pieces and his nose was broken. One of his subordinates sat down next to him and asked if he was okay. Without answering Comrade Qin, he grabbed him with his hand. The warrior did not understand what was happening, and all the life energy gradually left his body and passed to the guy. A few seconds later, the warrior was lying on the ground and Qin stood up. He realized that it was not Xiao but that nasty boy. But where he got the ability of the face of Buddha remains to be seen. But he didn't have time to find out, because Luan was already in front of him. The fast guy hit the traitor right in the face again. However, Qin was not so simple and managed to grab it with his hand. He told Luan that he was not as strong as his teacher, and his ability to suck was much stronger than the guy's. Luan's strength gradually began to flow to Qin, who laughed loudly. But the hero had an ace up his sleeve. He turned his hand into sharp claws. At that moment, he cut off Qin's hand. The villain began to scream at the top of his lungs, because his most powerful weapon was cut off with one swing. Luan didn't stop and repeatedly slashed his claws at Lu Qing. The traitor's body was cut like butter, and more wounds appeared on it. He called the only thing that could save him now, his worm. The huge carnivorous worm heard its owner and was already rushing towards his call. It was amazing how such a giant had covered such a distance in such a short time, but it was already standing behind Luan. Bleeding, Lu Qin ordered the worm to kill the boy. The animal obeyed and at that very second released its sticky saliva at the hero. The saliva hit his back and like a spiderweb prevented the guy from moving, while the wounded Lu Qin tried to take advantage of the situation. Luan became angry and turned his hand into a claw and told the worm not to even think about trying to take away his power. After these words, the guy jumped on the enemy and struck him in the stomach. Luan was supposed to cut the worm, but nothing happened because he had been saturated with the ability to heal wounds, and now his regeneration had increased several times. The worm decided to counterattack and spat his saliva at the hero again. The saliva tied Luan like strong ropes. The boy realized that it was more difficult to cope with a spiritual animal of such size than he had expected. Meanwhile, the wounded Qin, without one arm, ran further and further into the forest and was glad that the worm had detained his opponent. Luan also understood this. He knew that fighting with an animal was not a very good option, because then the squinting guy would leave. He watched as his enemy moved further and further away. He had to think of something urgently. Suddenly, new allies appeared before the hero, Chinny and Lala. It was very opportune. The guy was very happy about the appearance of the duet. Chinny stood in a welcoming pose and said that the cat heroine and her pet were already here. Lala confirmed her words with a loud meow. Help is of course good, but Luanya was interested in what happened to the teacher. Cinny said that she and the cat were not doctors, and that someone else would take care of him. She remembered Shu Lily, who said that she would take care of the teacher and that they should go help Luan. The girl said that they would deal with this worm, and let the guy catch up with that squinting guy, but Luan doubted that they could handle it. Two furious cats looked at the guy aggressively. Chinny's fur stood on end and she said that no mortal dare doubt the heroine cat and her pet. Luan realized that it was better not to argue with the girl and wish them good luck. Then he ran as fast as he could towards the unfinished enemy. The girl and the cat were left alone with the worm, and Cinny was glad that she would finally be able to show herself in action. The worm did not attack, but looked at the strange cats, to which Chinny said that it was obvious that he was timid. After these words, the worm opened its hellish mouth and spat its saliva into them. The ferocious cat and her companion were instantly covered in sticky slime. However, this did not upset Chinny. She told Lala not to be afraid because she would take care of everything. Suddenly, the girl heard a loud, furious meow. Chinny immediately looked back. It wasn't little Lala standing next to her, but a furious, huge red beast, and Chinny was shocked. The battle began. The worm attacked first and decided to tie up our girls. but Lala was able to deftly dodge the dangerous projectiles. Then the furious cat took advantage of the moment and attacked the monster with its claws. The cut ran straight across the worm's body. She did better than Luan, and the monster's body began to tear apart at the cut. However, the worm did not stay aside and managed to grab Lala with its threads. At that moment, the threads became covered in blue light. The worm sent electricity through his saliva to hit Lala. However, Chinny did not stand aside and jumped towards the cat, ordering the worm to leave her pet behind. Chinny slammed her hand into the worm's threads, but to her surprise, it did no damage to them. The girl pretended that this was the plan and said that it was just a diversionary tactic. Now comes the real attack. After these words, she sent her ghostly spirits in the form of cats to the worm's head. The ghost cats immediately struck the monster by exploding. Lala was saved from the monster. Chinny told her that this worm has rough, thick skin, and it will be difficult to cope with it, so Lala needs to do something about it quickly. The fog from the explosion cleared, and the worm immediately attacked the girl, not letting her finish. The monster sank into the ground, and everything around began to shake. But our heroes miraculously managed to dodge it. Lala stood up and immediately began to form a strange ball with her mouth. Immediately, the ball became bigger, and the cat fired a bomb at the annoying worm. Lala was pleased with herself. She knew that no one could survive something like that. The worm's huge body was covered with numerous wounds. Chinny was already happy with her victory. She praised the cat and said that she was worthy of being called her pet. The worm's body split into several pieces, and now it looked like sliced sausage. But victory was still far away, because each part of the body began to turn into a separate small worm. The worms released smoke, and the girl became angry at the monster's tenacity. Chinny covered her nose. She realized that this was the same smoke that was used on the students, and she didn't want to become feeble-minded. Meanwhile, Luan used Shadow Step at full power and was already catching up with his opponent. He quickly caught up with the cripple and happily jumped on top of him. The moment he found himself above the squinting boy's head, Luan activated Buddha's face, and the huge red projection struck the traitor with its weapon. The force of the blow was colossal. Lu Qin immediately lost an arm and a leg. He could no longer escape and began to beg for mercy. He said that the main villain here is Gu Yunqiao, and he is on the side of justice because he is a secret agent. The traitor began to cry. He told Luan to go and look for Xiao to kill, and not him. Suddenly, Qin heard a meowing sound next to him. It was a purple ghost cat. After a cute meow, the cat exploded right next to the guy's face. Qin screamed, his face was disfigured, and he called Luan all sorts of names. He just looked at the pathetic traitor, and then he replied that the boy had no right to judge the teacher. After all, his entire family died, and in his place, Luan would not have lasted so many years in a sober state of mind. The association is not the direct culprit, but it is related to what happened. The teacher captured the students only to tell them what the association really is, and not to harm. He remained decent until the very end, unlike Lu Qin, because he used the teacher and his comrades in search of benefits and considering himself right. But the most disgusting thing about this guy is that he squints. After these words, Luan attacked Lu Qin with many cats, making a scarecrow out of him. The guy didn't understand Luan's last sentence. It seemed to him that he was just looking for an excuse to beat him up. Luan replied that he planned to maim him half to death to give him time to think about his behavior. But Lu Qin simply laughed at this, because his ability makes him immortal. But the hero's strength is already running out. After this, the traitor opened his mouth wide and ordered everyone to come to him. At that very moment, hundreds of examinees approached the battlefield under supervision. Luan watched as they surrounded him, having completely forgotten about them. Lu Qin laughed. He said that there were several hundred disciples here. Would the red-haired guy have the courage to kill them all? At that very moment, one of the students thoughtlessly attacked Luan, but he easily dodged it. The zombie students continued to run after the guy, but he was fast and easily escaped due to the shadow steps. The traitor said that he and Xiao were very similar. They were both merciful and could not harm the innocent, which was why Luan would become the cause of his own defeat. But the guy didn't lose heart. He replied that since they couldn't be killed, they could simply be knocked out. After this, the hero began to hit the students so that they would lose consciousness, but did not cause fatal damage. After a few minutes, Luan began to get tired. He understood that these were the strongest guys among the applicants, and he did not expect that it would be so difficult. Now he has 1,000 points. Each will require 20, and we shouldn't forget about the main enemy. Meanwhile, his opponent stood up in the middle of the crowd and shouted that he was forced to admit that people like Luan were born once every decade, and that he was the strongest among all the examinees in the country. But if he thinks that this is enough to resist the association, then he is a fool and a madman. After all, today the association has strengthened its position and enjoys widespread fame. It has more masters at the monster level than there are stars in the sky. And in this world, psionics either join them or die. After these words, the traitor put his hands on the two disciples and sucked their life force dry. He said with a smile that tomorrow's news would announce how Luan and his teacher had killed those two students. Luan became enraged. He activated Shadow Step and jumped at his enemy. The guy was ready to tear him to shreds, because he was the one who associated with that very dark side of the association. But suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his chest. The guy didn't reach his target and immediately fell to the ground. His head was spinning, his body was aching, and his legs were not obeying him. Luan realized that he had no more strength left. Lu Qin's ridicule grew more and more. He said that the guy had used his abilities for too long and had used up all his energy. After all, he lacked combat experience. The zombie students continued to attack the hero, but now he could no longer dodge them. Qin said that the winner is always right and no one will care what really happened. The hero and Xiao will be forgotten very soon, branded as criminals, which is what they will remain in history. And now, he will become a hero who will be praised. After that, Qin laughed very loudly like a true villain. He then ordered his disciples to kill the boy, at which point Luan became scared. The old man and Deputy Zhao watched the events silently. The man asked the girl if this time too nothing would change. He also asked her to suppress the bad news about the security department as much as possible. The girl smiled and said that newly hatched chicks throw off their unhatched brothers. Nature has always been cruel, but people never called it evil. Man is also a part of nature. He is no different from other creatures, and Darwin's law reigns on Earth, so a pessimistic view of the future will only drive him to the grave faster. The old man replied that people are not like that, and Hao appeared on the horizon, looking for his friend. Besides Hao, other comrades also came looking for Luan. Luan heard his friend's voice and responded to his call, shouting that he was here. Fu Guangqun ordered the students to listen carefully. All the people on the battlefield were under control, and therefore they needed to be stunned, not killed. Zhao was surprised by what she saw, and the old man only smiled imperceptibly. There were not only students on the field, but also grown men who were desperate to make their children human. Guangqun asked his father to urgently call the people together. All these men were psionic idlers who owed him money. One call and everyone would be there. Because his father was a member of the state committee, one of the menacing men approached Guangqun and reported that other comrades would soon arrive, and if everything suited the master, then could he put in a good word for them with his father? The guy answered in the affirmative. At that moment, Hao gave the arrogant guy a kick in the ass and told him to go save people and stop showing off. The enraged guy said that he had only talked a little, but at that moment Hao suggested that they measure their strength. Whoever stunned more people would win, Guangqun agreed. With their combined efforts, the children and psionic fathers began to win the battle against the zombie students. At this moment, the traitor, who a couple of minutes ago was rejoicing in his victory, realized that the situation had turned not in his favor. Hao, who was holding one of the disciples, began to loudly call out to his friend Lin Luan. The red-haired hero responded, and his friend was glad that he was still alive. Luan asked why he came back, and Hao replied that he took his father to a safe place and then thought about how to help his friend. Fortunately, Fu Guangqun was able to call a gang of psionics in an instant. The friend also asked what had gotten Luan so upset, but the guy said that there would be questions later because their enemy wanted to escape. Meanwhile, Lu Qin couldn't think of anything better to do than just run away as fast as he could. Luan wanted to chase after him, but he still didn't have the strength. Suddenly, Hao said that he had a solution because he knew that his friend would be exhausted from fighting so much, and so he brought one thing. The guy took out of his pocket a strange little flask with 2 A's on the label. He said it was a miraculous A-level reagent that his family had been saving for many years. The boy couldn't believe that his friend would share such a remedy with him, but Hao said that Luan would thank his father later. After all, right now their main enemy is running away and they need to catch up with him to restore justice. Lu Qin was panicking. He didn't understand why these fools were appearing one after another, and did they really hope to defeat the person from the association? He kept telling himself that he was the representative of the association, while the enraged Luan followed him. Seeing this hellish aura and power, Lu Qin was frightened. He couldn't just lose like that. At that moment, disgusting worms crawled out of the traitor's body. But let's go back a little. Hao said that this is a reagent that his father carefully kept, and this is his father's gratitude for saving him. Luan immediately drank the miracle medicine. Suddenly, he felt a powerful surge of energy, and it seemed as if he was completely recharged. Luan asked his friend if they could handle it here themselves, while he went and looked elsewhere. Hao replied that he could go and punched another zombie student. Luan's legs were electrified, his shadow tread was ready. His hair was ashen again, and now it was time for justice. The one who thought he was invincible because he was a representative of the association was instantly cut in half. Lu Qin couldn't even use his worms because Luan had cut him into small pieces. He screamed at the top of his voice and immediately a huge red Buddha foot appeared. Luan could summon the Buddha's projection again. Seeing the Red Knight, Hao was happy because he recognized the projection of his teacher, which meant he came to their aid. All the students and men finished dealing with the crowd and watched the powerful aura. Suddenly, Luan appeared in the distance and Hao called out to him, saying that they had dealt with everyone on their side. Luan turned to his friend and replied that he had also settled everything on his side. Hao was still under the impression. He asked the guy if he saw the projection of the teacher and where he was now. Luan replied that the teacher had just left. It was good that he had helped them settle this problem. Suddenly, our hero remembers that he forgot something. He forgot about Lala and Chini. The red-haired hero told his friend that he had one unfinished business and ran away. Meanwhile, a frightened Chini and Lala tried to escape from the huge monster. The worm had once again merged into one copy, and now the heads of smaller worms were sticking out from its entire body. Cindy ran as fast as she could, and the poisonous fog pursued her faster and faster. Suddenly, someone called upon 3 flame scents, and a small flame appeared in his hand. A bullet of fire flew past the fleeing Chinny. There was an explosion, and the cute heroine and her pet flew up from the shockwave, just like in a movie. But the landing was not so soft. Sister Qingni hit Chukui on the head and yelled at him for almost burning her sister. Shuyu calmed down and ordered her sister to get up immediately, otherwise the fog would cover them. Fire will only help for a while, because the worm has absorbed the reagents intended for the examinees, and they will not be able to defeat it. We need to take the students and Xiao away, because the hallucinogenic fog is a very powerful thing. The heroes ran away from the deadly smoke, and Chukui covered them by shooting his fiery fingers into the fog. Suddenly, someone next to them said that it was not the end yet. The heroes turned around to see who it was, but because of the fog, nothing could be seen. The unknown person ordered the evil worm to stop. Suddenly, the powerful evil creature obeyed and stopped attacking. At that moment, the heroes, frozen in place, realized that they had fallen into the fog. However, they were still conscious. Chukui asked his companion why the fog had no effect on them. A system table appeared before the unknown person, which signaled that the capture was complete. The huge evil worm instantly turned into a small, cute animal. A fat worm fell into the hand of a guy who said he left the glasses on him. Now this terrible beast has become Luan's pet. Chinny, seeing the red-haired handsome man, immediately ran to him. The girl jumped on Luan at full speed and hugged him tightly. She started kissing him, and Luan tried to push her away because her sister was looking at them. Moreover, they first need to find the teacher that Shi Lily is looking after. A little later, they came to the girl, and Luan asked her about the teacher's condition. The girl replied that he was still alive, but had lost a lot of blood and urgently needed specialist help. Luan understood everything and replied that they would take him away because Hao and the others would come soon, and they shouldn't see Xiao in such a state. Chukui interrupted their conversation and said that the girl was also from the association and that she could not be trusted. She needed to be killed right now. Lily replied that the association was not only made up of the Red Army and Lu Qing, but also of people who wanted to change things and were working towards it, in addition to Xiao. The old man smiled imperceptibly when he heard his student. Shi Lily ordered the guys to take Xiao away because she considers them good people. After some time, Hao appeared in the clearing and asked his friend if he had managed to sort out his business. The guy also asked if he had seen the mentor. He couldn't be found anywhere. Luan replied that he was injured and that was why he left, but he would be fine. There was no need to worry. A little earlier, the guy left Xiao to his new comrades. Chinny couldn't hold back her tears and began to sob very loudly. Luan tried to calm her down by saying that they would only be separated for a short time, and that until he could introduce her to Hao, it would be difficult for him to explain everything. The girl asked the guy what he was going to do in the association, and he replied that if the world is not perfect, then he will make every effort to fix it. He will follow the path of the teacher and do what he thinks is right. Remembering these words, Luan turned to his friend and said that they would be entering the Psionic University. The exam is over. The news about the case of the hero from the slums, the beautiful Xiao, does not lose the interest of observers. The association is worried that the truth about the destruction of Chao City may surface, revealing her dark past. In addition, the overwhelming number of people present there were put to sleep, so they do not know anything. The association decided to hide Xiao's existence, instead reporting that they had eliminated the criminals who wanted to kidnap the examinees, and that the beautiful Panguan had disappeared after being injured. Life was slowly returning to normal, and some woman was bragging about her son to the salesman. Luan's mother approached her, and the woman immediately noticed her friend. She laughed and asked if Luan had taken the exams because her son was in 15th place, and he would definitely be able to get into university. After that, she looked at Luan's mother indifferently and asked how her son had done. Mom smiled sweetly and replied that her son had been accepted to the Psionic University. The woman first smirked, expecting that her son had not entered. And then, when Luan's mother's words reached her, she went into shock. Later in the evening, in the hero's apartment, his mother called him to the table. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Mom was surprised that someone came to them so late. She opened the door and saw Chunggong and his assistant, who said that they had come to congratulate Luan on his admission. Seeing the swindler on the doorstep, the mother was surprised, but he replied that he was no longer a swindler, but her son's best friend. Then some strange guys appeared on the threshold with fish in their hands. Luan's mother didn't recognize these people, but she was also amazed. After them, Tsini appeared on the threshold with Lala, who introduced herself to her mother as Luanya's new girlfriend. This information shocked the mother even more. After the girl, the guy's friends appeared on the threshold and also came to congratulate him. The poor mother thought that the whole city would probably come here today. A little later, Hao asked Luan why he called the villains here. The guy smiled and said that now they were all friends and they needed to forget past grievances. Meanwhile, a secret meeting was taking place in the association's tower. Zhao Kenlin sat at a wide table with an unknown man in the shadows. The man asked the girl if it was true that Xiao had defeated Lu Qin and given up trying to kidnap the students. Chenlin remained unperturbed and replied that as far as she knew, that was exactly how it happened. The stranger said that he heard that one of the students stood out in particular. Chenlin smiled and replied that she had not noticed anything like that. A little later, our heroes headed to the entrance ceremony. A lot of people came. About 3,000 students from all 4 districts were here. Fu Guangkun snorted arrogantly, saying that the guys were acting like they were from the countryside. But unlike them, he once gave a report in front of hundreds of thousands of people without any worries. Suddenly, our heroes noticed that there were especially many people in one place. The big muscular guy claimed that their western region was the strongest because it was full of athletes. Another guy in a business suit answered him that only dumb jocks lived in his area, and they were no match for them. The best people lived in the south. Guangkun, in his usual manner, said that it was probably the local blockheads who had caused the commotion. Luan noticed that there were a lot of people today, and this was a great chance to earn some points. But he needed to calculate everything. The guys on both sides of the barricades continued to argue more fiercely about whose region was cooler, the western or the southern one. Suddenly, Luan laughed very loudly and called everyone around him simpletons. The crowd fell silent and all the bullies turned to see who this brave man had appeared. The crowd dispersed, and they saw Luan, who said that none of them were strong because they were all scum. After all, the strongest region is the eastern one and they will tear them all to pieces. The blonde asked if this was the area that was hypnotized, which is why the exam was never completed, and the association let them all through out of pity. The system reported multiple points received due to dislike, which certainly made Luan happy. Suddenly, Luan said that it was all because in their area, there was an incomparable person who could defeat 100,000 people in a second. A handsome and macho man, Mr. Fu Guangkun. Poor Guangkun was covered in sweat because he realized the situation he was in, and the guys continued to jump around him and shout that he was their strongest master. But the guys from the west and south were not laughing. They decided to test in practice how strong this guy was. Luan didn't waste any time and quickly grabbed his friend by the collar to quickly run away from there. As Luan ran away, he was happy that he had earned a lot of money, but he did not notice the obstacle in his path. The guy hit him head-on and immediately fell down. He looked up to see who was standing in his way. It was the Thunder Tiger Wang man who asked the boy who he was. Suddenly, the man remembered that he was the one who had crippled his stupid nephew. It seemed that Luan was about to get into trouble, but someone appeared behind the Thunder Tiger. The brute turned around to see who had called him. It was the old rector of the University of Psionics who asked not to frighten his new students. The old man said that he doesn't care what happens outside the university, but while the tiger is on his territory, he forbids threatening students. Surprisingly, the Thunder Tiger immediately cooled his ardor and fell silent. He then turned to Luan and said that it was better for the boy not to run into him on the street. The head teacher also arrived in time and told the tiger not to be angry, since he had been specially invited by the association to take part in the grand opening of the school year. Then the head teacher, in a more stern manner, ordered Luan and his friends to quickly change into their uniforms and go to the assembly hall. Our heroes did not argue and did as the head teacher said. Luan and Hao were surprised at how beautiful their uniforms were, but Guangkun still called them simpletons. In one of the rows, unknown guys saw our heroes, and everyone else noticed them too. Luan understood that they had noticed Guangkun. The guy said that the year had just begun, but everyone already knew about him, and everyone wanted to compete with him. The guys from the two districts whispered among themselves, asking if this was the guy who called himself the strongest. Guangkun couldn't stand it and shouted at Luan that it was all because he called the eastern region the strongest, to which he replied that it was true and he needed to relax. At that moment, the rector appeared on the stage and coughed quietly. Suddenly, the whole hall stopped making noise and silence fell in the large hall. Luan was surprised that the old man simply coughed and everyone became silent. The rector didn't even need a microphone to speak. The old man greeted all the students and said that his name was Fan, and he was the rector of this university. Fan continued. He understands that no one wants to listen to the old man's story, but there is nothing to be done, because speech is the only way to convey your thoughts. After these words, everyone in the hall laughed. This university was founded by an association, so when children join it, they technically become half members of the association. And from this moment on, their every word and action will be watched. But the old rector hopes that one day the students will be able to achieve more than the association. These words touched Luan. He heard something that was dear to him. The old man finished and went to his place, and the head teacher thanked him for his speech. And now he asked to greet one of the association's chairmen, Quan Ming, who prepared a speech for the students. The chairman smiled and greeted everyone sitting in the hall. He then said that his main interest was games. Hao did not immediately understand what the chairman said, and asked his comrades what he said about his interests. Guangkun replied that he didn't know anything about what the chairman meant, because the association's office was a mysterious place. Quan Ming continued by saying that the resources that contained supernatural power were very important to the association, which was why their extraction was always given top priority. The first good news is that they recently found a completely new vein, the scale of which is not inferior to the Liutao mountain range, and excavation will begin in the near future. All the students were surprised by this news, but Quan had a second piece of good news. The association decided to allow students to participate in the process. All this time, the rector looked at the chairman with contempt and remained silent. And the students were even more shocked that they would be able to participate in the extraction of resources for the association. Quan said that mining ore is not an easy task, and they will encounter unknown beasts and bad weather conditions, which is why they need guards. But what seems like an opportunity may end up being the cause of the students' deaths. It's impossible to count how many 5-star psionics have taken off after participating in the mining. For example, Mr. Thunder Tiger is one of them. For any psionic, taking part in the development of ore deposits is a dream. Of course, this is very dangerous for students, so the association will select only 3 of the strongest students. The students stood up from their chairs after hearing this. They couldn't believe that only 3 would be taken. The chairman put his hand in his pocket and asked them not to be upset, because the selection would be carried out fairly. He took a golden shield-shaped badge out of his pocket and said that it was a qualification badge, and whoever got it would be able to participate in the development. 3 badges have already been placed on the selected students' uniforms. The students immediately began looking for badges in their pockets but could not find anything. Quan added that the badges are not an indicator of the final result, since the result will be known in 3 days. Now it became clear what games the chairman likes to play. He wants them to fight with their classmates. The students weren't thrilled with these assignments, but everyone wanted to get into the development. Quan said that they would now name the 3 students who received the badges and called the head teacher to help him with this. The head teacher happily walked onto the stage and turned on the screen. There were 3 black signs on the screen, and the chairman announced the first owner of the badge. Ye Dao, a 3rd-year student on a full scholarship, is ranked 23rd on the university's list of top students. The second owner is Yan Gani, a 3rd-year student, a member of the research team, and a weapons expert. There was discontent among the students because the badges were given to some monsters and they won't be able to take them away from them. It's not fair. Quan immediately calmed the crowd by saying that the 3rd owner of the badge was a 1st year. Luan was glad that the 3rd guy would be among them. The chairman said the 3rd owner was involved in the events of the attack by the intruders during the exam. He is brave and resourceful. He promptly called the psionics who helped repel the attack of the villains. It was Fu Guangkun. Luan and Hao were shocked when they found out that the 3rd owner of the badge was their friend. At this moment, Fu Guangkun realized what a dire situation he was in. The chairman smiled evilly and said that he would look forward to the results in 3 days. After the meeting, the guys heatedly discussed what they had heard. Murders were prohibited, but otherwise there were no restrictions. You could resort to any methods to take away the badge. Some refused to participate in this so as not to suffer, because many understood that there was no chance against 2 seniors. But the newcomer Guankun was a real weakling. It was worth starting with him. Guankun also understood this. He knew that all the guys would start collecting badges with him. The guy asked his friends to help him. After all, Right now, there was already a crowd of students standing in front of him, pushing them into a corner. "Give it back, know your place, and quickly give the badge away. Give it back and we will do without bloodshed," the students shouted to Guangkun. Luan asked his friend if he wanted to get into mining at all. "Of course I want to. It's the cherished dream of any psionic. But I didn't think that I would have to fight with everyone for this dream." The crowd of students realized that the guy would not just give up his badge, so they decided to take action and take it by force. Luan shouted for the guy to give him the badge, but he froze in place, so the protagonist decided to act on his own and snatch the badge from the guy. Then Luan made an unobvious move that shocked all the students. He simply threw it into the air and sent it far into the clouds. Everyone turned to look at the flying away badge, but Guangkun was the most shocked. Meanwhile, Hao and Luan took advantage of the distraction, grabbed the frozen Guangkun and ran away. A few minutes later, they broke away from the angry crowd. Guangkun still couldn't believe what Luan had done. He wanted to kill the guy, but the hero saved him, so Guangkun couldn't kill him. And he should have thanked him, but he still threw away his precious badge. Hao and Luan watched their friend rushing back and forth and couldn't tell if he was crazy or okay. Luan decided to take pity on his friend and said that he still had the badge, so he threw away the regular card. Guangkun was so happy he burst into tears. He snatched the badge from the guy's hands and began to kiss it. However, the guy was saved only for a while. Soon the guys will understand that it was a trick. He should think about what to do next. Suddenly, a familiar cat appeared behind the boys, seeming to call them to follow her. Luan turned around and saw his friend, a cat that belonged to Xiao. The guys told Guangkun to find a good place to hide for now, and they would also think about what he should do. And our heroes themselves ran after the cat Xiao. A few minutes later, the cat led them to two guys who immediately recognized Luan. The two guys saluted to greet the boss. Luan was a little embarrassed. He couldn't get used to the fact that he was now the leader of the group. The guys asked how the first day with the boss went. If anyone offended him, they would definitely teach him a lesson. But the hero replied that everything went pretty well, and the university's affairs were his personal affairs. Luan decided to get straight to the point and asked them why they came. He was also interested in what was going on with Xiao. The boys replied that the teacher had already come to his senses, but recovery would take some time. The association's people are secretly trying to track him down, so he asked them not to visit him for now. Hearing that everything was fine with the teacher, Luan calmed down a little and thought about it. He then said that they needed to quickly find out the whole truth about what happened in Chao City and make it public so that they could protect the teacher. Luan asked the guy if there were any clues that would help solve the mystery. The guy said that year the terrorist group Tumen captured the city. No one had heard of it before. Most of them died when the city was destroyed, but some still managed to escape. For several years, Zhao's key goal was to find them, and he caught almost all of them, thereby justifying his fame. The news said that the fog had come to Chao to take away the supernatural ore. But Xiao felt that if that were really the case, there would be no need to destroy the entire city. Therefore, he interrogated the criminals with partiality, trying to find out the real reason, but none of them cracked and eventually died. She said that they were all very powerful psionics who were emotionally difficult to interrogate. He didn't want them to die, so the likelihood of them dying at the same time was low. The only explanation for their sudden death is that they were killed to keep the secret. The one who killed all the fog people knew all the secrets, but the interrogations were not in vain. Some things about that person became known. Firstly, there is a tattoo on his body that looks like an eye. Secondly, he likes to play. The tattoo is clear, but what does it mean that he likes to play? Luan asked again. The guy explained that they say that during the torture, one of the criminals lost consciousness, but he kept muttering that for him it was just a game. Luan thought, there were too few clues and it was difficult to identify a person based on these signs, although there was one candidate in mind. The hero decided not to keep the boys for long and ordered them to return. If any news appeared, let Lulu pass it on to him. The guys said goodbye and went about their business while Luan thought about the information he had received. The hero was walking around the university courtyard. At the same time, he was looking for Guangkun, who had disappeared somewhere. Work secretly, tattoo in the form of an eye. Games, the one who benefited the most is the criminal. I read about this in a book on criminal psychology, who benefited from destroying the city of Chao. A silhouette of a man with purple hair came into the guy's head. He didn't notice how, lost in his thoughts, he came to the entrance to the administrative building. Using the maximum level of perception, Luan did not sense any particularly strong flows of supernatural power emanating from the building. Suddenly someone called him, and the guy immediately turned around. But before he could notice, Chairman Quan Ming appeared next to him. Surprised, Luan immediately turned to the man, sensing his presence. He saw him next to him, The chairman stood silently as if he suspected something about the guy. The situation was getting heated. The heroes stood silently when suddenly their silence was interrupted by a fat head teacher running after the chairman. Luan was shocked that he couldn't feel any power coming from the man even at close range. He had to use capture. Suddenly, the system reported that it was impossible to calculate the enemy's will to live. It was impossible to determine the required number of points to activate capture. Luan stood in shock. He didn't understand what this message meant. It was the first time he encountered something like this. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by the head teacher, who sternly asked what the guy was doing there. Luan played dumb and said he was just lost because the campus was huge. The head teacher asked what district the boy was from and what his parents did. Luan replied that he was from the Eastern District and that his mother worked as a nurse. The head teacher adjusted his glasses, looking at the boy with disdain. He thought that he was just a local stupid boy. Meanwhile, Luan continued to look at the man with a stupid expression. The head teacher believed him and told him to get out of there because he shouldn't be here. Luan breathed a sigh of relief, noting that the head teacher was a pretty nasty guy. Suddenly, he called the head teacher and asked him to wait a little. The man asked what he wanted, and Luan asked if the head teacher could get him some nude photos of the chairman. What? Nude photos? What are you talking about? The head teacher asked, looking at the stupid guy. Why would I do this for you? Do you want me to expel you for such jokes? No, you'll just do me a favor, Luan said. And at that moment, the system reported that the capture had been completed, and he received the skill of sycophancy at the maximum level. In a few seconds, the head teacher turned from an angry man into a kind and obedient person who happily agreed to help the boy. After some time, the head teacher came to the chairman, who opened the door and asked what he wanted at such a late hour. The head teacher was holding 2 glasses of wine in his hands. He suddenly sneezed and, as if by accident, twitched. The wine spilled and stained the chairman's snow-white shirt. The head teacher panicked and began to apologize, saying that he just wanted to invite the chairman to have a drink. Let me help you wipe it all up, the man said, and he touched the chairman's shirt sharply. Quan looked coldly at the head teacher and asked what he was doing. In an instant, the man was shown the door. The head teacher caught his breath. He almost died of fear there in the room. Now it's up to Luan. Quan walked slowly around the room and thought that the head teacher was simply a worthless person, and that it was a mistake to appoint him to a position at the university. He slowly unbuttoned his stained shirt. Everything was about to become clear. A few seconds later, Quan unbuttoned his shirt and a large tattoo in the shape of an eye appeared on his chest. Meanwhile, Luan, who was watching him, saw the tattoo and immediately realized that the very person who knew all the secrets was the chairman. However, the man immediately felt something. Luan realized that he had been noticed. He became overexcited and could not hold back the flow of supernatural power. Quan stood motionless in the center of the room. Then he said that apparently a small rat had taken up residence in his room. Are you an enemy who wants to die or a fan? Either way, it would be unwise to do so. His gaze became crazy and he said, "For your courage, I will play hide and seek with you. I will count to 10 and then go look." The chairman began to count. Luan realized that things had taken a dangerous turn and he needed to get out of here quickly. The tattoo on the chairman's body began to glow purple, and he himself began to look even more insane. Luan realized that the man had noticed even the slightest presence of energy. He had been inattentive. But the guy learned that the eye actually exists. The chairman didn't see him. He just needed to get out through the mine and blend in among the other students. But while Luan was thinking about the plan, the chairman counted to 10. It was time to move out to search for the rat. He threw off his shirt and his body became covered in black. Quan asked if the guy was hiding well. Then his body began to glow purple. His hair fluttered like flames. His eye emitted a mysterious cosmic energy that did not bode well. Quan laughed as he sensed the boy's psionic energy. There was no longer any time to wait. Luan used his shadow step and immediately headed towards the exit of the mine. Having sensed where the enemy was, Quan also followed him into the mine at great speed. Luan shot out of the ventilation shaft, but Quan kept up with him. He sensed where the enemy was heading. Luan began to get tired. His ability gave him incredible speed, but even with it, he could not break away from his pursuer. Eventually, the chairman got ahead of him and jumped right in front of him. Quan raised his head. His face was filled with pure madness. However, he saw something that was not quite alive. In front of him stood a purple cat filled with explosive energy. Luan was happy that he was able to outwit the man by leaving him the shadow cat. If the hero reaches the door, then victory will be his, and only after that will he discuss with others how to defeat him. A smile appeared on the guy's face. The doors were not that far away and victory was close. However, an obstacle appeared in front of him that erased that smile. Luan crashed into an invisible wall. What the hell is this? The guy was rubbing his nose after the blow. Meanwhile, the chairman grabbed the cat by the throat and mercilessly blew it up. Kwanya was angry that the guy dared to joke with him. Meanwhile, Luan was examining the invisible obstacle. He realized that it was some kind of barrier, apparently one of the chairman's abilities. Previously, the guy did not feel his energy, but now it is everywhere. It seems he has begun to guess. Kwan noted the boy's intelligence, but no one can hide from him on his territory. After all, the entire house in which they were located was under the chairman's dome. The mark on the man's forehead grew brighter and brighter. Not a single rat would escape from his territory. At this moment, Luan realized that he was trapped, and it seemed that a direct confrontation could not be avoided. Therefore, if possible, it is necessary not to let yourself be revealed, which is why the hero used his appearance ability, which dyed his hair an ash color like Xiao's. He also put a mask on his face. A difficult fight lies ahead. The chairman was heading towards the guy like lightning, while Luan used his shadow cats to attack. The two beasts crashed into the purple figure, but from the smoke emerged an undamaged Quan, who was also moving towards his target. Luan realized that the cats wouldn't work on him, so it was time for the fierce claw. With one powerful blow, the guy hit the chairman and cut his left side. Did it really work? The guy looked at the figure of the enemy, who was missing one arm. But the chairman didn't care. He easily restored the missing body part. Looking at the guy, he said that he was sorry because in this form he was immortal. Is there not a scratch on him? His body is as if intangible. Luan used Shadow Step and turned on full power. He began to run around Quan, analyzing the situation. Then the guy suddenly stopped and grabbed the chairman by the shoulder, using his absorption ability on him. The purple aura began to dissipate and circle around the boy's hand, but Quan remained motionless. He wondered where such a brat got such a rare ability. Suddenly, Quan laughed. He allowed all the energy to be absorbed because there was no point in it. Luan also realized this. The sensations were not the same as usual. His energy did not increase. So he clenched his fist tighter, and all the power he had absorbed dissipated. The guy was breathing with difficulty. He was already pretty exhausted, but the fight hadn't even started yet, and the chairman had some strange abilities. And he continued to mock the guy. "This is not how you planned it, right?" he said. However, Quan did not expect to meet such a master at the university. He was unfamiliar with the guy's energy. "I don't know why you decided to go against me, but alas, you can't handle it." Luan also understood that now his strength was not enough to fight such an opponent. Quan asked the boy if he felt its power on his body. The thing is that in this area, all the energy is controlled by Quan. The barrier absorbs it, transfers it to him, and so on in a circle. Therefore, he cannot be killed here. And due to the constant cycle of energy, he can continuously use his signature move without any losses to himself. So Luan can do anything as long as he doesn't die before Quan has his fun. Seeing the huge ball of energy in Chairman Luan's hand, he was immediately frightened. In an instant, the building lit up and an explosion thundered inside it. At the same time, someone was slowly approaching his entrance. It was the old man, Fan, the rector of the university, who understood what was going on here. The explosion hit Luan and the shockwave sent him flying. The guy landed. Having traveled a couple of meters with difficulty getting up, he understood that he was finished. There was nothing he could do about it. The chairman slowly approached the guy. He said that they say in the Eastern District, "An outstanding student has appeared. Is it really you?" Quan demanded that the mask be removed so that he could see who was hiding underneath. Luan did not obey and could only swallow air with difficulty. Then the chairman demanded in a threatening tone that he remove the mask. But at that moment, an old man began to knock on the barrier, which distracted Quan's attention. "How many times have I said that school is a place for learning? I will not allow students to be put in danger. They do not take me into account at all." After his words, Fan put his hand on the barrier and it began to heat up. Then the barrier suddenly cracked and it seemed like it was about to burst. The chairman stood calmly, but then he became furious and shouted at the old man to get out of his way. But the old man didn't listen to the man. He just continued to use his recovery ability. The gazes of the two powerful psionics met. They both disliked each other. Fan's gaze became more furious. He told Quan to stop doing whatever he wanted. Quan, in turn, suggested that the old man measure his strength and find out which of them was stronger. Meanwhile, Luan took advantage of the moment. He realized that everything would be over unless he used his special ability. There was no other way out. In an instant, the hero was covered in a red aura, and a huge scarlet projection appeared behind him. An image of Buddha, the ruler of the underworld. Seeing such a powerful ability in an ordinary student, Quan became interested. The Scarlet Buddha waved his huge staff. He then hit the barrier where the old man had made a crack. In an instant, the barrier burst like glass and the protection began to disappear. Luan was happy. This was his chance. The guy activated Shadow Tread. Finally, he was able to get out. The hero mentally thanked the teacher for saving him. And the old man just smiled when he saw that his academy student was saved. The chairman stood motionless, his target gone. Quan was amazed that the boy was able to use Lord Penguin's technique and split the energy. The old man smiled. Mr. Yan was right. This was that outstanding young man. Luan had run a sufficient distance. No one was chasing him, and his strength was already running out. The guy realized that he was safe and there was no point in hiding anymore. So he took off his mask and breathed a sigh of relief. Luan thought, most likely the destruction of the city of Chao is the work of the chairman. Although I got closer to the solution, I still attracted unnecessary attention to myself. I'm afraid next time it will not be so easy to get to the chairman. Besides, the guy is not that strong yet. But the most annoying thing is that his capture ability does not work on him. Is it because he doesn't have enough points? The hero screamed in despair. Why was everything so difficult? But in any case, he must tell the whole truth about him. Not only to find a way to deal with the chairman, but also to keep everyone safe. The next time, the guy will be able to get close to the chairman only by getting into the development of an ore deposit. That was why Luan knew he had to get this badge. The badge, it was taken away, said the beaten Guangkun. There was not a place on his face without bruises. Luan was shocked. Now his plan became even more complicated. It was taken away in the morning, half an hour after you left. Luan couldn't believe that Guangkun lost so easily. He was still the strongest disciple. What could I do? I was alone, and there were many of them. And they were all students from the Southern District. The Southern District was originally run by the military. The students there are close-knit. The badge can end up on anyone, and the students from other districts will never know who exactly has it. They say that on the last day they will decide who gets the badge on rock, paper, scissors. In other words, to get it back, you have to defeat all 500 students in the southern region, and that's impossible. Yes, Luan also understood that it would not be easy, because the main difficulty now was that he could not stick his head out too much. But suddenly a brilliant idea came to his head. Perhaps it would not be necessary to go there in person. The next morning, in a spacious house, one of the disciples was sitting and meditating. Suddenly he heard the steps of a man approaching him. The calm guy with red hair opened his eyes, noticing the uninvited guest. If you came to fight for the badge, then you are the 101st, the student answered the unknown silhouette. The guy pointed to the badge lying next to him and said that if his opponent wins, he will take it. Those are the rules. He also asked to introduce himself because he doesn't want to fight a nameless fighter. Luan introduced himself as Su Dakyang, a new student from the Southern District. A new student? And a new student suddenly had the courage to challenge me? Confidently, let me tell you about my abilities as a senior. Before I became a psionic, I was well versed in various martial arts. After awakening, I achieved great success in the techniques of supernatural power. Not a single student in this school has been able to defeat me in a one-on-one duel, said the red-haired boy, and summoned a martial arts devil dragon. But Luan was full of confidence. He said that he was ready to get this badge at any cost. At that very second, a fist from a senior student hit him in the face. A barrage of blows rained down on Luan, the boy beating him like a punching bag. From such a massive attack, Luan fell and flew several meters away. Suddenly he stood up and said he gave up. He realized he couldn't compete with the senior. It's hard to call it a fight. The red-haired guy sighed in disappointment and called Luan a weakling. It was really hard. You are a very strong student, Luan praised the guy, but he turned around and asked him to leave. But Luan wasn't going to leave. He kindly asked the senior to take a photo of him with the sign, because he wanted to publish it on Instagram. This proposal surprised the guy. He didn't understand why the newcomer needed his photo. Luan explained that if everyone knew that he had fought with a senior student, they would certainly respect him. Now it's clear why this newbie came. What a vain guy. The senior agreed to the request. He pulled out his badge and struck a pose. Luan took out his phone. The hero asked the guy to look into the camera and make his eyes wider. The phone started taking a picture and a bright flash appeared from its camera. The flash blinded the boy's eyes and he tried to hide from it behind his badge. It was at this moment that Luan took advantage of the opportunity to snatch his reward. Then he ran away shouting that the senior badge had been stolen by Su Dakyang from the Southern District. The red-haired guy shouted for the enemy to stop. But Luan had an ace up his sleeve, namely his Shadow Tread. In an instant, he flew out of the house, leaving behind only electrical traces and a stunned senior student. Damn, you think you can get a badge that easy? I'll search the whole school, but I'll find you. You won't get away with it. What was his name again? Su Dukyang from the Southern District? A little later, the guy showed up at the hostel in the Southern District. Suddenly, he noticed a familiar girl who also came up here. They immediately recognized each other. They were those same senior students with badges. The guy and the girl asked at the same time, "And your badge was taken away too?" And this badge was taken away by Su Dukyang from the Southern region? Yangani said that this scoundrel came to her with a pitiful look and asked to take a photo to publish it on Instagram. Yedao said that he was tricked in the same way, and at that moment they shouted the name of that scoundrel. Meanwhile, Su Dukyang seemed to sense that someone remembered him. The guy was wondering who had their badge now. There was only one badge for 500 people, and the guy understood that it was unlikely that he would get it, but he still really wanted to get it. Suddenly, he heard something happening behind him. There was Luan, who quietly threw something into the air. Su Dukyang turned around and saw a badge with a cat keychain attached to it spinning behind him. The guy couldn't believe his eyes. It was a badge. It was clearly a gift from the gods. They heard his prayers and sent it to him. Suddenly, the guy was called out by a female voice that came closer to him. It was an enraged Yangani who said that it was her badge with a cat. The girl threateningly pointed her machine gun towards the guy. "What badge?" Dukyang asked. "Our badge is safe and we won't give it to you." In an instant, guys from the southern region appeared near the guy. Dukyang ordered them to deal with the strangers. It seemed that this was exactly what the seniors had been waiting for. It was time to have some fun. Several explosions thundered, and mixed with the sounds of impacts, one could hear the screams of the boys. The dust from the battle began to clear, and the first defeated guys from the southern region appeared. They lay and cried at the feet of the enraged seniors. Yangani grabbed the blonde by the jacket and demanded that he give her the badge. Dukyang was crying, but there was nothing left to do but give the badge to the girl, which made her very happy. However, Yedao's badge was not visible, and the boy asked Dukyang where his badge was. He fell to his knees and began to beg them not to beat him, because he didn't know where his senior student badge was. Meanwhile, Luan watched the performance and was glad that the plan worked, without even having to fight them. After all, the last badge went to Luan and no one even noticed. After some time, the voice of an adult man asked the chairman if he had called him. It was Wang Man who suggested that the boss wanted him to protect those 3 students. Quan confirmed his guess, saying that if that's what he called it, then yes, they needed to be protected. It would be necessary to keep an eye on them and not let them get hurt while mining ore. The Thunder Tiger did not understand why the chairman was so careful. After all, they were only 3 kids. But the chairman remembered that guy. In an hour, the names of 3 students would be announced and he would definitely be among them. After 3 days of fighting for the badges, it will finally become known who will get them. 3 winners were announced. The first 2 winners were those same seniors, Yedao and Yang Gani. They were asked to come up on stage. No one in the hall doubted that they would win because they were too strong. But everyone was interested in who would be third. The guy guessed that the third one would be the guy who fought with Yedao. His friend heard that it was Dukyang, but the blonde guy said that it wasn't him. Someone called himself by his name. He was furious at such impudence, and now he will finally find out who set him up. The head teacher said that he would now formally introduce the third winner. He is a real dark horse. And the third winner is student Lin Luan. The guy came out on stage and there was a commotion in the hall. No one knew who this guy was. Luan thanked everyone, and the seniors looked at him with unperturbed expressions. In the guy's face, they recognized the same Su Dukyang, who had fooled them a few days earlier. The guys in the room started making more noise. They wanted to know who this guy was, if his badge was real, and how he even managed to get it. Luan smiled sweetly and explained that he was just lucky. The thing is that yesterday he was walking near the school and suddenly noticed some shiny thing fall from the sky. Of course, he went up to see what it was. To the guy's surprise, when he came closer, he saw that it was the same badge. That's exactly how it happened. So the guy was just lucky to be in the right place. Of course, no one believed this stupid story. The crowd became more and more furious. A crowd of students started shouting that Luan was cheating, that he was clearly hiding something, and that the story was just a fabrication. The boy's friends also didn't understand how he got the badge. Especially Guangkun was confused because it was his badge. Everyone in the room was shouting that it was a scam. Luan just stood there and listened to the crowd's screams. Meanwhile, his system was simply bursting with incoming notifications, which said that he was getting 10 points for hating other students. Even Guangkun stood up to shout that it was his badge, but Hao intervened and ordered him to shut up. But how can I remain silent if this is my badge? He stole it from me. But Hao knew that it was unlikely that Luan was just lucky, and it was unlikely that he simply cheated. While they were all having fun and arguing, this scoundrel found a way out of the situation and took out a badge. Hao's fist clenched, feeling uneasy at the thought that Luan had gotten past them. Meanwhile, notifications continued to come into the guy's system, and eventually he earned 10,232 points for hating other students. The head teacher shouted that luck is also a part of strength. Anyone who continues to complain will be expelled. Student Lin Luan deserved to win, but the audience did not calm down, because even the head teacher defended him. Apparently, he bribed him. The most angry were the seniors, who seemed like they were about to kill Luan right on stage for using them. The guy panicked and asked them to stop because he had not broken the rules. The rules don't say that the badge needs to be taken by force, and the hero just thought a little about how to get it without using it. Yahello turned away and said that the boy had taken a roundabout route. But it would have been better if he had given up right away because there was no place for little children in the mine. Some of them died there in agony. But Luan knew that he was far from weak, and besides, he had a plan. The meeting ended, and everyone began to go about their business. Luan stood on the street with his friends. Hao said that the trip would last more than a month, so the guy needed to be extremely careful. When the hero returns from the mine, he will become much stronger, to be honest. Hao was even a little jealous of him. One way or another, the guy will also train hard and will definitely become as cool as Luan. The hero looked at his friend and admired him. Hao asked Guangkun if he would like to say a few words to Luan before leaving. He turned around and said sharply that he would not lose again, and he would defeat Luan 1,000 times, no, 100,000 times. Then Guangkun turned around and left. Luan had no choice but to accept this statement. After some time, the guys were preparing to go to the mines in jeeps. Luan greeted the Thunder Tiger and asked if he was the leader of their brigade. Wang Man, meanwhile, was disappointed that even such a young boy received a badge. Apparently, their university had completely slipped in terms of development. The seniors weren't thrilled either and said that they shouldn't be assigned to him, since the guy ended up there by accident. At this moment, Luan realized that this trip would indeed be difficult. Meanwhile, the chairman sat in one of the jeeps and observed the situation. He did not see that fair-haired youth among the candidates. However, among them, he noticed a young man who interested him. It was a photo of Luan, whose appearance was similar to that blonde guy. One of the officers approached the Thunder Tiger and asked permission to report. The man loudly declared that all units were formed and ready to depart. The time had come to leave. The advance unit was ready. The armed detachment was ready. The special operations detachment was ready. The student brigade was ready too. And also the inspection team was ready, which included She Lily and an unknown man with glasses. Once everyone was ready, the officer shouted for everyone to listen to his order. He gave the order to leave, and a column of jeeps drove off to the mines. The cars were driving at high speeds towards their destination, while the boys were told information about the mine that was sent to their watches. Its area is approximately 15 square kilometers. 2 months ago, it suddenly began to emit supernatural energy. The reason for this is still unknown. The technical department provided a diagram that shows the distribution of energy according to its concentration. The area itself is called the Crimson Eye. The children looked at the goal of the task and noted that the area really does look like an eye. Now it's clear why it's called that. Luanya was frightened by something completely different. That eye again, which he had already seen on the chairman's body. Yahello noted that the darkest area near the pupil was the place where energy was concentrated, meaning that Wang Yu was there. The guy hoped that they would have the opportunity to meet him because he is a living legend. The Thunder Tiger asked who the red-haired boy thought he was. Did he really have the courage to talk about meeting Wang Yu? The boys didn't expect such a harsh answer. It was unclear why the Thunder Tiger was so angry. The commander explained that Wang Yu is the center of the energy explosion in the mine, and his power is comparable to the power of an entire planet. It is better not to think about him. Any contact is fraught with death, so even approaching him is not allowed. Exploring the vein is an extremely dangerous job. The concentration of supernatural energy there is too high. This means that we may encounter particularly strong creatures and plants. After 2 months of observing the Crimson Eye, we managed to find out that it is divided into 4 zones. This time our team consists of 200 people, and we are taking students for the first time. So you will be assigned to the safest Zone C, and since Commander Wang Man is responsible for your safety, he will also remain in this zone. Hearing these words, the Thunder Tiger was not happy. A few hours later, a convoy of vehicles arrived at the first post. Luan asked if they had arrived at the mine, but the commander said that it was just a transit post. The association was primarily concerned with the presence of the military during the development of the mine. They are not responsible for exploration of the vein, but only ensure security on the territory of the mine. Intruders will not be able to get here under any circumstances, so only our 200 people have access to the vein. The convoy moved deeper into the territory, and soon the bright sun set behind the horizon and night fell. The commander ordered all members of the brigade to turn off the engine and set up camp for the night. The convoy stopped and the guys got out of their cars. The seniors stretched. They wanted to sleep, but seeing the enchanting glow, the guys realized that they were in the right place. In front of Luan stood huge trees that were shining with blue light. From a distance, they looked like huge mushrooms. The commander told the boys to pitch their tents, and tomorrow they would begin reconnaissance. But Luan stood motionless. He looked into this shining brilliance, and it seemed as if the forest was hypnotizing him. Suddenly, he was distracted by a figure standing behind him. The man said that such minds can confuse people. It is better not to go there alone, because every leaf here can be dangerous. Luan turned to see who approached him. It was a man with glasses. He introduced himself as Yan Qi. He was from the supervision department and was sent by Yan Mu. The teacher told a lot about the guy. Luan didn't understand who Yang Mu was at first, but then he remembered that it was the same old man in the wheelchair. Since this man is from the supervision department, then Shi Lily is here. Yan Qi said that it is so. She is currently setting up a tent. Luan suggested that their department supervises the work in the mine, and Qi replied that they supervise a lot of things. But this time, their department has some other business in this place. Morning came. The commander ordered the company to rise and ordered everyone responsible for Zone C to line up. A few minutes later, everyone was standing in a line, and the commander ordered the crew to check if everything was in place. Luan was also standing here. He noticed that there were about 30 people left in the Zone C exploration team. The others were already moving deeper into the forest. She Lily too. The guy envied them. But suddenly from the ominous forest, a noise similar to a scream was heard. What happened? Are they already in trouble? Luan thought. Suddenly, they saw something explode. The mushroom cloud from the explosion was so big that it was visible even from their position. The squad was scared, but Wang Man quickly calmed them down. What are you guys yelling about, you bunch of idiots? Are you men or what? Then he said that they would move out in 30 minutes. The commander understood the order. Thunder Tiger stepped back, and the commander told the squad to listen to his orders. They were responsible for security in the outer area of the mine in Zone C. The risk of running into trouble here was low. Their job would be to patrol the area and collect psionic crystals. The wristwatch will remind you of the danger level of plants and animals you encounter, and will also suggest ways to interact. In addition, the watch has the function of determining your location and correspondence. If you really need help, immediately inform the command. Now we are getting ready to split up. In 20 minutes, we will enter the mine in groups of 3. Luan was assigned to a squad with 2 other guys. One was tall with ash blonde hair, and the other had the same red hair as the hero. Luan tried to be polite and greeted his new comrades, saying that he hoped they would take care of him if anything happened. The guy with ash hair told the hero to relax, and they would cover him if needed. However, suddenly the boy felt a sharp pain. At that moment, the Thunder Tiger was looking at them, and Luan did not notice anything. 20 minutes later, the teams moved out to the patrol site, where there was quite an interesting fauna of different mushrooms and plants. Luan moved forward while 2 guys from the squad stood behind him, the guy cutting his way through with a knife. While cutting down another plant, Luan was amazed at how unusual they were and how they could grow to such a size. While the guy was busy with the plants, the guys from his squad smiled ominously and began to move away. Luan also noticed this and shouted for the guys to wait for him. The guy tried to catch up with them when suddenly the vines next to him began to move. Luan looked at the tree branch where he felt movement. It seemed like it was just a hanging plant. However, after a few seconds, the vines dropped and sharp claws emerged from the tips of the plant. Luan was surprised by what he saw and decided to immediately check his watch. The watch said that it was a snake-like vine. It attacks the victim and penetrates the body, sucking out energy. The best way to interact is to kill. Liana tried to attack the guy, but Luan easily cut her into small pieces. Pieces of vines fell to the ground and dried up in an instant like deflated balloons. Luan immediately realized that psionic energy was coming out of them, and if he found the root of the vine, he could probably get a good piece of ore. The guy turned his head and did not see his comrades anywhere. He tried to call them again, but suddenly he heard someone approaching behind him. It was the Thunder Tiger who said that at last he had a lucky chance. This time, no one would stop him. It was time to pay the bills. Luan panicked when he saw the man who was clearly not friendly. He tried to settle the situation by telling Wang Man that there was no mortal enmity between them, perhaps just a small disagreement. And besides, his nephew started it first and Luan is not guilty of anything. Thunder Tiger said that he didn't know what his nephew had done, but family was family and he had to avenge him. The fight began, and the Thunder Tiger attacked first using Thunderclap. his hand immediately becoming covered in electricity. Thunder rumbled and a beam of lightning flew towards Luan, but he managed to jump away. The lightning didn't hit the guy, but the trees that stood behind him were less lucky. The lightning erased them, leaving charred stumps of the trees. Seeing the consequences, Luan realized that this would not end well. He needed to get out of here as soon as possible. The guy tried to run away, but the Thunder Tiger did not lag behind. Then the guy remembered about his ability to capture. Just before leaving for the mine, he saved up points for such a case. Mentally apologizing to the Thunder Tiger, he decided to capture it. However, the tentacles nearby got ahead of him. To the boys' surprise, the fauna took advantage of the moment and attacked them with their vines. Both Luan and Wang Man did not have time to react, and the vines tightly bound them. Then the creatures began to throw them and hit their heads against the trees and the ground. Eventually, the tentacles threw them into some dark hole. For a second, the boys forgot about their differences as they tried to get back on their feet after the heavy blows. But suddenly, a huge boulder fell on Wang Man's head, splitting in half when it hit. The Thunder Tiger immediately lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Luan tried to call him, but the man did not answer. Then Luan took a step to get closer to him. But suddenly he heard a crunch under his feet. The guy looked down. He was shocked by what he saw. Luan was standing on a pile of bones. Many creatures had died here before him. At that moment, he realized that he was in a very difficult situation. Meanwhile, long vines like worms began to emerge from under the pile of bones. Within a few seconds, they had already filled the entire space, and it seemed as if Luan was in a snake den. The system also reported that it was a snake vine, danger level D. Luan was furious that this watch was written nonsense. How could such a creature have a low danger level? However, there was a small note that, in some cases, they could form a level A snake nest that had already wrapped itself around the Thunder Tiger and was ready to drag it underground. Luan noticed this in time and ran to help his former enemy. The boy used his fierce claw and cut through the vines that were covering the man. With difficulty, he raised the unconscious body and realized that it was better not to linger here. After all, the passage through which they entered was tightening, and literally in a couple more minutes there would be no way out. Luan said that he had no plans to be hostile to Wang Man, even though Wang Man intended to finish him off, but he couldn't leave him here to die so worthlessly. So he grabbed the bulky body and threw it into the hole with all his might. To Wang Man's surprise, he flew out of the hole and crashed into a tree next to it. The man's bulky body fell down, and as he fell, he crashed into every branch he could, but fortunately he did not fall back into the hole. Meanwhile, Luan was left alone with the snake's lair. The tentacles rushed to attack. The guy tried to dodge them. Suddenly, a brilliant idea came to his mind. He wondered if he could bite and subjugate plants. To his surprise, the system reported that the guy could capture them. For this, he would need 1,000 points. The guy was glad that his cool system was capable of this. One of the vines tried to attack the hero, but he dodged and grabbed it tightly. Then our vampire bit Liana in order to activate the subjugation. Liana broke free and stepped back. The guy was wondering if it worked. Suddenly, he received a reply from the Liana. Apparently, the capture had failed. Luan suggested that biting just one vine was not enough. It was like biting a person's hair. This means you need to bite something more important. There is most likely a key root here. Luan used his maximum level perception ability and sensed where the psionic energy was accumulating. This must be the root. The guy was delighted. The hero summoned his shadow cats, and for this trip to the mine, he not only accumulated points, but also improved his skills. The guy pointed at the vines and ordered his shadow cats to blow everything up. The cute creatures immediately followed the order and attacked the impassable wall of vines. The vines were charred, and after the smoke cleared, the hero saw something that resembled a hole. In the depths of this hole, the silhouette of a green monster with red eyes appeared. The monster growled. Outwardly, it resembled an enraged gorilla, whose hair was replaced by vines. And the monster also had the bones of other creatures on its body. The system identified him as a wild beast, a creature whose body had undergone a mutation that resulted in him losing his mind. Only the killing instinct remained in him, and the creature's danger level was A. Meanwhile, the soldiers on the surface saw a shiny pink crystal. One of them was happy that they had just arrived, and he had already found ore, and the piece was so large that it was most likely Class B ore. Suddenly, their joy was interrupted by the roar of a beast that sounded behind them. The boys turned around and saw in front of them a hyena with 3 heads, reminiscent of the Cerberus from Legends. The watches on the boys' hands indicated that this was the same wild beast as the one Luan was fighting. Also, a notification came to the watch that a mutated centipede was discovered in the zone. Following her, a mutated vulture and a mutated spider were discovered in the zone. The commander shouted that mutated beasts had been discovered throughout the area. and that the squads should be extremely vigilant. He also ordered all troops to destroy these dangerous monsters. The senior students moving deeper into the forest also encountered one of the wild animals. In front of them stood an enraged hyena with sharp spikes sticking out of its paws. Behind the hyena were two small puppies who were whining in fear. The watch also identified her as a wild animal that needed to be killed. The girl doubted this because it seemed that the monster was simply guarding its puppies. Suddenly, the mad creature grabbed two small puppies into its mouth. The mouth closed more and more tightly. The puppies whined, but at one point they fell silent when the mouth closed completely. The senior students were shocked to see a horrific scene. A hyena was devouring its own puppies. The creature went mad and covered itself in the blood of its own cubs. There was no longer any doubt. Yahello shouted that this creature had mutated and they should kill it. Explosions thundered in all parts of the forest. Everyone was fighting with mutated monsters. The chairman and his squad also made their way deeper into the forest. His squad consisted of 5 people, including him. 2 of the squad were a guy with scars on his face and a pink-haired girl. There were 2 more guys, a man with a mask on his face and a man who looked like a scientist. They stood in a clearing covered in scarlet fog. The chairman ordered them to keep an eye on this place and not let anyone in. Meanwhile, a fight began between the hyena and the senior students. The creature opened its bloody mouth and attacked the guys. But Yahello was not afraid. He closed his eyes and concentrated on summoning his spirit beast. The boy then suddenly thrust out his hand, and the martial arts spiritual dragon struck the enraged creature in the face. The whining dog immediately flew away from the guy. But this only made the monster angry. The hyena stood up on its paws and growled angrily. Yahello looked at his enemy and noted that they had encountered a strong opponent. Meanwhile, in other parts of the map, the fighters were already exhausted from fighting monsters. One of the soldiers noticed that these creatures were much more powerful than the reference book showed them to be. It seemed impossible, but the guys weren't going to give up. Meanwhile, Luan bit the green mutant. The system reported that the orangutan vine was tamed. The ability of the maximum level snake vine tentacle was copied. The terrifying monster turned into a laughing monkey in an instant. Luan was amazed that even such an unconscious creature could be captured. What kind of system was this? The hero climbed onto the monster's back and said that it was time to see what was so interesting in this mine. Meanwhile, the battle continued in another clearing. Yahello used his coiling dragon power to trap the enemy. The blue dragon began to circle around the hyena, confusing her and not allowing her to pass. The guy shouted to his partner that now was the best time to attack. The girl understood this long ago and was already preparing to attack the enemy in a jump. As she flew over the stunned hyena, Yangani readied her machine gun. The cannon loaded, and at that very second a barrage of electric bullets fell upon the creature. Machine gun fire blew up everything in its path. Her partner covered himself so as not to be hit. Even the ground shook from such an attack. While still in the air, she ran out of ammunition and the girl greedily took in air. The dust from the raised earth cleared, and the heroes saw a dead, riddled animal lying on the ground. Finally, the fight was over. The girl noted that they were still too inexperienced for such battles. Meanwhile, the scarlet glow somewhere near the center of the forest became stronger and stronger. The chairman stood in front of a red clot of energy that seemed about to swallow him up. The eye in the center of Kunming's chest reacted to the emitted energy and also turned slightly red. The chairman's detachment stood at the entrance at that moment and waited for him to finish. Suddenly, they heard someone approaching them. The guy with scars turned around to see who was coming towards them. It was Yan Chi, who thanked the squad for their help and asked if the chairman was there. The boys weren't too happy to see the inspector. They asked what he wanted there. The inspector explained that, judging by his watch, the chairman's mark ended here. You know yourself that maintaining order is our job. I don't interfere in other people's affairs, but I must make sure that everyone present carries out their duties responsibly. The masked man replied that the chairman was safe now and they were in charge of the area, so they shouldn't meddle in something that wasn't their business. He ordered the inspector to leave the place, but the man pretended to be friendly and did not move from the spot. Then he said that each of them understood that mine exploration was not an easy task and that often someone died. And if by chance some inspector dies, no one will suspect anything. The masked man's eyes lit up and he fired at the inspector, the force of the blow knocking off his glasses and causing him to fall to the ground. The inspector grabbed his watch and shouted, "What are you doing? I'll report this right away." But the villain quickly reacted and fired his beam straight at Yanqing's watch. He came closer to the guy. Their figures seemed ominous, and then he said that the inspector asked for it himself. The beaten guy asked what they were going to do with him. He looked pathetic. But in reality, this was just a distraction. At this moment, he was thinking about Shilili. The invisible girl took advantage of her comrade's distraction and penetrated deeper into the zone. They recalled the words of a teacher who said that the inspection was originally a department that controlled the management. Perhaps for some, this became a stumbling block. Over the years, they have lost dozens of outstanding employees, and the influence of the inspection department has waned, and now the department is just a fiction. And these victims are now reporting that inspectors are dying in the line of duty. But they understand perfectly well how things really are. It is clear to everyone that the chairman is involved in something. The old man knew that his strength was running out, so he would personally go to the mine and try to restore it with Wang Yu's help. This is one of those rare occasions when Quan Ming can be killed. Shillili stepped forward and asked the mentor to assign her this job. The old man replied that although the chairman was now weak, this task was too dangerous for the girl. But Lily looked up with pain-filled eyes and said that she had to do it. The girl's memories flashed with photographs of her family, where at first they were friendly and then her parents died. Lily ran towards the danger and her gaze was serious. She understood that she had to deal with him herself. Meanwhile, the scarlet essence became stronger and stronger. When the time came and there was enough strength, the chairman decided it was time to absorb the energy. He screamed for the entity to return to him. He would finally get it. The center of the scarlet ball began to electrify, and rays appeared from it, which headed towards Quan. The villain's eye grew brighter and brighter, and he felt it reaching out for the energy. At one point, the chairman felt that very surge of strength that he had dreamed of for so long. But his joy was short-lived. A blue blade appeared right in the center of his eye and pierced it right through. The chairman looked at his chest and saw a blade along with scarlet energy. He immediately jumped back, blood pouring from his chest, and he did not understand what was happening. It was Shillili who was creating a blade with her energy. She attacked him without him noticing. The chairman immediately realized that this was an invisible man who could convert psionic energy. Lily rushed into the attack. Those two photos of her parents appeared in her head again. It was time for revenge. Quan didn't see her, so he couldn't avoid the first cut that landed on his cheek. Then his body felt pain in all parts of his body. Lily did not spare him. She continued to cut the chairman, inflicting hundreds of cuts on him. Eventually, the villain fell to the ground, exhausted. Lily looked at the enemy. At that moment, she thought that she had managed to defeat him. Meanwhile, her comrade was kneeling and raising his hands up. He began to beg the enemy squad for mercy, saying that he was wrong and would leave right now. Yanqi understood that Lily had most likely already finished, and it was time to get out of here. The girl also decided so and turned around to leave, but that same red energy appeared behind her. Suddenly, Lily crashed into an invisible wall. She immediately realized that something was wrong. Turning around, the girl saw how the energy was returning to the chairman. The man's corpse rose and he said it was painful. Someone wanted to kill him, taking advantage of the opportunity and knowing that he was weak now. So this someone is a person from the association. But you were late. You had to act faster, but you can understand you were waiting for me to be alone. Unfortunately, you didn't take something into account. You didn't understand my abilities, and I, by the way, have already regained my strength. These words shocked Lily. How did he regain his strength? This can't be. He couldn't do it so quickly, even with Wang Yu's powers. The chairman summoned his ball and said that now they would see who attacked him. He ordered the unknown person to show himself, and then he would try to make a beautiful corpse out of him. Lily realized that things weren't going to be easy for her now, and at that moment an explosion thundered. The inspector fell to the ground. He also heard the explosion that thundered where the girl was. The guy immediately realized that it was Lily, and apparently everything did not go according to plan. Yanqi immediately jumped up and ran towards the explosion. But the detachment guarding the chairman was not going to let him go just like that. Then the inspector turned around and shouted for them to go away, his arm becoming covered with a mechanical prosthesis of enormous size. The man then slammed his huge fist into the ground, causing it to immediately split and shake. Taking advantage of the rising smoke and confusion, the inspector ran to help his friend. But suddenly ropes flew out of the smoke towards him, which immediately grabbed the guy and struck him with a lightning bolt. The squad of fighters said that they would not let him go just like that. The girl noticed that the guy was just crying, but in fact he turned out to be quite a capable young man. Meanwhile, Lily was having a hard time. The chairman launched one bomb after another, but the girl successfully dodged them, albeit with difficulty. Quan noticed that his opponent had mastered the skills of hiding and converting energy, but it was only a matter of time. In any case, there was nowhere to run. His gaze became terrifying, and he shouted that he was going to blow everything up here. The scarlet energy emanating from the center of the forest began to move further and further towards its borders. The seniors were standing by the hyena's corpse. They were restoring energy when suddenly a scarlet glow appeared behind the hyena. Yaodao told the girl that she needed to leave and find the others to recover. But Wang Yu's energy had already reached the hyena's corpse. Power filled the monster, and the once dead creature opened its eyes. The animal immediately jumped to its paws. This time it was much more furious. The seniors couldn't believe their eyes. They no longer had the strength to fight her. The enraged beast rushed at them, and at that moment the boys realized that the end had come for them. But suddenly the liana grabbed the dog by the paw, and it fell a couple of meters from the target. Then more vines flew towards the beast and they completely neutralized it, wrapping its paws and mouth. The senior students who were watching this did not understand what was happening. Suddenly they saw a shaggy gorilla appear behind the hyena. The boys thought that now it was definitely the end for them, since another animal had arrived. There was a dark figure behind the beast who told the boys not to worry because their torment would soon end. The system window announced the successful capture, but they didn't hear it. The seniors didn't know what to do. They couldn't cope with two mutated beasts. Unexpectedly for the boys, they saw how the hyena and the gorilla hit each other with their paws. The seniors decided that these animals were now in cahoots, and the girl cursed the day she decided to go to this mine. Suddenly, the monsters turned around and went back into the depths of the forest. The seniors looked at each other. Were they really afraid of us? Besides, the guy thought there was someone on the orangutan's back in any case. Whoever it was, they were saved. Meanwhile, Luan, riding on a hyena, walked deep into the forest. The guy laughed very loudly. The hero said that he would become the future king of the mutated beasts. They headed towards the center of the vein. It was time to deal with all the beasts in their own way. In another area of the vein, soldiers were running away. These creatures were stronger than expected, and there was no better solution than to flee. Behind them stood an angry three-headed hyena, but at one moment it turned into three cute little dogs. The spider with a dozen crazy eyes also instantly turned into a cute creature. Next was an angry vulture who turned into a cute little bird. The last one was the mighty centipede, which also became one of the animals in the collection. Meanwhile, in the center of the forest, the inspector was barely holding out against a squad of fighters. The scarred boy was surprised at how long the inspector had been able to hold out against the four of them. But it was time to end this. Suddenly they heard a strange rustling in the forest, the trembling of the earth and the sound of something approaching. The scarred boy turned around and couldn't believe what he saw. A pack of wild animals from all over the forest was rushing straight towards them. All of them were aggressive. The girl, seeing this picture, did not understand why all these animals had gathered in a pack. This had never happened before. Behind the orangutan, the mysterious dark figure still appeared. Luan said that it was all because they were guarding their master and working for him with all their might. Powerful beasts attacked the squad guarding the chairman. An orangutan attacked a scarred guy who deftly dodged his vines. A cute but cheeky girl summoned a shield in the shape of a bear's face to protect herself from the web. The bespectacled scientist used his whip to subdue the dog that was attacking him. The masked man used his colossal strength and dealt with the three-headed dog with his bare hands. While fighting, the squad forgot about the weak inspector and he crawled away from them, watching what was happening in horror. Suddenly, Luan appeared next to him and asked if the guy was okay. The hero picked up the man and said that he would take him away from here. But the inspector was interested in how he ended up there. The guy replied that he was just passing by. Yankee was injured, but he couldn't just leave because Lily was still fighting with the chairman. Luan was shocked when he heard these words and asked to tell him everything in more detail. Meanwhile, the explosions in the center of the mine continued. Lily could no longer dodge so deftly, and blood began to pour from her mouth when another explosion managed to hit her. The chairman mocked the girl's injuries, wondering how much longer she would last. But suddenly a beam of energy struck his eye and pierced the man's head. It was Lily who attacked the enemy and suddenly jumped back. "Whatever you mumble, you are now in my energy field. Here I am immortal and you cannot escape from me," said the chairman, and his head was covered with electricity. After a few seconds, his eye recovered and turning around, he repeated that the girl could not escape from him. Heart, head, nothing works. No matter how strong, he should be a center for collecting psionic energy. But why doesn't he have one? At this moment, Lily looked at the clot of scarlet-red energy that was called Wang Yu. It seemed that only now she understood one of the chairman's secrets. The villain said that now he had played enough. There was no point in wasting time, otherwise she would find out too much. The chairman decided that this was the end of the matter. His body was covered in purple energy like a living bomb. He decided to use the explosion of the entire energy field. A wounded Lily looked at the impending disaster and memories flashed through her mind. She remembered her parents and their tombstone, near which she had once vowed revenge. The light from the living bomb became brighter and brighter. The girl did not believe that she would die now. She could not die until she took revenge. Suddenly, from under the ground where Lily stood, a huge beast mouth appeared and swallowed her along with the earth. A little earlier, Luan ran to Lily and remembered the words of the inspector, who said that almost all the deaths of the inspectors are connected with Quan Ming, including the death of Lily's parents. She has been hiding for so many years to take revenge on him, so now she is determined to win at any cost. If she fails to kill Quan Ming, she will be trapped in his energy field, which means certain death for her. And since the energy field cannot be broken, Quan Ming will be invincible. At this moment, Luan guessed that any ability must have a drawback. There must be a place where the field can be bypassed. Yanqi looked at the guy and asked, "What place is this?" This place was the ground through which the worm had crawled into the field and was now devouring Lily. The appearance of the worm surprised the chairman and the girl. A huge worm, just like in an exam, appeared from under the ground and swallowed her. Then the worm immediately jumped into the ground and burrowed inside. The chairman was angry. He knew that the energy field did not cover the surface of the earth. But in any case, he couldn't let his opponent escape. The chairman raised his hand in the air and called upon his ability. He used the energy field opening, and an insurmountable wall flew after the worm. The energy field cut the worm without any problems. One part was behind the field, the other under it. The hero ran towards the worm. He put on his mask so as not to reveal his appearance. A girl fell out of the cut-off part. Fortunately, she was not harmed by the chairman's attack. Lily was breathing with difficulty. She was covered in the worm's drool, but at least she was alive. Quan chuckled. Who would have thought that such huge worms were hiding underground? But this worm would not interfere with his plans, so the chairman raised his hand in the air and began to concentrate energy. Suddenly, he heard someone approaching him behind him. It was the same guy who attacked him recently with ash-blonde hair and a mask. Luan jumped onto the dome that was protecting the chairman and used the Dharma phenomenon. At that very second, a huge projection of a red warrior appeared behind the guy. He called on the Lord of Panguan. The battle with the main villain begins.